Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 1st, 2011 meeting of the Edina City Council and the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Roll call, please, Ms. Fang.
Member Bennett. Here. Member Brindle.
Here.
Member Sprague.
Here.
Member Swenson.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. We have a form of agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve the form of meeting agenda that was provided?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, we approve the meeting agenda as shown. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next, we have the adoption of the consent agenda, and I'm going to turn this over to Mayor Pro Tem Swenson because there's a couple of issues on the consent agenda that I would, depending on whether they're pulled or not, I would otherwise have to recuse myself from these matters. So, Member Swenson, would you handle the consent agenda, please?
Sure. Is there anything anyone would like pulled? I have a couple, but I will take anybody else's first.
Yes, Member Swenson. Number 4I, please.
Okay.
E, G, and H.
E, G, and H.
Yes,
and I will
please.
pull C.
Okay.
Okay. Based on that, we're left with A, B, D, and F. Is there anything on the other side? Nope.
A, B, D.
A, B, D, and F.
A, B, D, and F? Yep. Is there a motion to approve the remainder on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I pulled C because I had one fact that was alluded to, but it wasn't given any basis. And how did you come up with the median numbers for that neighborhood? Was that something that you had numbers on or that you needed to figure on your own, Carrie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Swenson, members, or Pro Tem Mayor Swenson, members of the council. With lot divisions, staff typically runs those medians ourselves. We base them off the county database records for lot width, lot depth, and lot area. Since this is just a shift of a lot line, we're not creating a new lot.
Right.
And so it was clear in this one that the medians would be clearly met, and we'd run that exercise just to make sure that they do meet all the medians.
Okay.
And in this case, they did.
So you ran the numbers and they met?
Correct.
Okay, then I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Does anyone have any other questions about the project? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mary, let's start with E.
Okay, E.
And is this, Mr. Director Hool's, your question on the engineering services for Tracy Avenue?
Right. I'm just curious, this area is currently concrete, is it not?
Yes, that's correct.
And looking at the replacement of that roadway, will the replacement also be concrete?
Councilmember Brendel and council members, what we're anticipating is that a portion of that will be concrete, as in the bikeways that might be put into Tracy, but the travel lanes would be asphalt.
So that would be a change to this area?
It absolutely would be. And we still, what this proposal does is works through that public process with the neighbors so that we come up with a solution that everybody can live with.
And has that process been done yet?
No, that's why we're going for the proposal to bring the consultant on board to go through that process.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That was my question.
Anyone else have a question on that project?
Yes, thank you. Director Hool, I understand from the description of the work to be performed that sidewalk will be replaced where necessary. Will new sidewalk be added on the west side of the street where it is currently missing? There is a school and a park located on that west side, and there are some gaps.
Yep. Councilmember Bennett and Council, I believe that needs to be fleshed out during the public process itself. We're not going into it saying that you absolutely have to have a sidewalk on that side, but we want to be looking at all those different components. Because obviously it would be taking some boulevard, and in order to put in bike lanes and some travel lanes, some of the curb lines will have to move around a little bit. But we want to work through all that process. I don't want to state that this or that will be completed with this project before I go through the public process with the neighborhood.
understood a couple of points or a couple of concerns about that. One is I think the gaps are fairly significant with the park and with the school, with the speed of traffic on that roadway, with the place that safe crossing can be made. I think there's some feeling of safety or lack of safety. And then another note that I have, or something else that I noted in the materials, are a reference by WSB to the necessity of obtaining variances from state aid standards. So that's already contemplated, and possibly fitting everything within the span of the roadway could be attempted from the very beginning. And then finally, just so residents would be clear, because it's a state aid street, that additional sidewalk, if it were to be requested and approved, would not result in any addition to the cost of the project to residents, because the cost of the sidewalk would be completely covered by state aid funding?
That's correct, yes.
Great, thank you.
Member Bennett, could we revise the proposal to say sidewalk installation and/or replacement? Would that satisfy?
I would like sidewalk in the missing parts to be planned for, if possible, from the very beginning. It is a higher volume street. It also is a street that is a route that's commonly traveled by people from both the northwest and northeast quadrants to the high school.
Right. So in the proposal, that's what I'm saying. Should we just add the language sidewalk installation and/or replacement, and then in terms of the proposal itself, it would include that item, and then when you get to feasibility, you can flesh out the exact details.
Sidewalk, I think you said rather than or and. So sidewalk construction and replacement is needed.
Okay.
Yeah. And my only point on that is that there are several kind of dead-end streets. I think it's Hawks Drive maybe, and another one in there, that they come out on the west side, and there is no sidewalk there, and you really can't cross there. And it is a walking shed for that school, Countryside School and district. So do we have a motion for this?
I have one more question. Just in terms of the potential realignment of Benton, can you just describe that issue to me? Is that where you come up to the stop sign and then?
Yes, if you follow Benton from east to west or west to east,
Yep.
There's a jog in there, and quarter of a block or whatever it is.
It's at the school.
And so we want to look at that with the school district and see if we can align that so it makes it more efficient for their buses and safer intersection than what it is today.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
I would move the matter.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mary, I think you also pulled the Community Foundation.
I did. This is more a comment than anything. I have no problem with the proposal, and that is that the rent for the Edina Foundation be forgiven in return for the work that they do to manage the designated fund for the Veterans Memorial. And I would just say that the foundation manages designated funds for police, for fire, for park, for a variety of funds that support city work. So I would say that we ought to just forgive the rent, period, because they do. I don't know if there are varying opinions on this. My opinion, if we're going to forgive the rent in return for work that the foundation does for the benefit of the city, I think they do that all the time with managing park funds, police funds, fire funds, and this one. So I would just expand this action to say that in recognition for this designated fund and other designated funds that benefit city work, that the rent for the Edina Foundation be forgiven. They currently pay, I forgot, $150 a month, I believe. $100 for one fiscal year. Yeah, it's $150 a month to rent a small office at the senior center. And being a foundation, 501c3, any expense they can do without would benefit them.
Thank you, Councilmember Swenson. I think they brought this to, the foundation brought this to us with the intent to describe it as a barter, that they believe that this particular fund is going to come with an extraordinary amount of small individual transactions, a lot of extraordinary amount of time on their part, and that's where it emanates from. I would note that the request is for one fiscal year and not a perpetual agreement.
Since their request is for 1 year, if we have the support of the council to do that for the year, then could we put the discussion at another time as to how we feel about the long term, expanding it? Would everyone be comfortable with, if that be the case? Joan,
Comfortable
Member
talking about anything.
Member Bennett?
I would be comfortable discussing it at a future date, understanding that there are some legal restrictions on the city's ability to donate, and that we had a discussion in a work session earlier this evening about the fact that the city can provide funding that is by its nature fee for service. And then my last concern would be that of transparency and accountability, and that there be some, so those elements can all be included in the discussion, a later discussion.
Okay. Is there a motion to?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. And the covenant regarding maintenance yard, H?
Yes, sorry about my sniffling. I had my microphone on. Okay, this is a cinder block building at 7100 Ohms. I have not heard of assembly occupancy before. This is a new concept for me. This is a building where one end of the building has one address and the other end of the building has another address. So I guess I'm curious what the current uses are of 7100 Ohms. And I have a variety of questions here, Steve. So if do you want me to address my questions, or do you have a presentation?
I do not have a presentation.
Okay. All right, great. Let's see. Okay. So there's a statement in what we received, and I have to find it here. Approved covenant agreeing to leave that part of Outlot A indicated on Exhibit A open for as long as the current building on 7100 Ohms Lane is required to be an unlimited area building. What does that mean?
Okay, the building code if there's an assembly occupancy in the building, an assembly occupancy being a large gathering of people, like a theater. In this case, the owner wishes to put an assembly occupancy in the building. The building is not the ratio of the other occupancies to the assembly occupancy. The required ratio cannot be achieved in a building of this type of construction and of this size unless he is allowed to have an unlimited area building. An unlimited area building is permitted by the code under certain conditions. If you have a 60-foot open side yard, excuse me, and a fully sprinklered building. So those are the two conditions which would allow an unlimited area building. So if you, the theory behind an unlimited area building, you obviously can't have a ratio because you have no limits on the area. So that goes out the window and the ratio is no longer a problem. So if he's allowed an unlimited area building, then he can put the assembly occupancy in there with no worries about the required ratio.
So is there a maximum number of people that can be in the building at a time? I mean,
certainly. But
okay.
that maximum number of people in any building can vary depending on its use. So if we have a manufacturing use, we could put in, the code assumes we are going to have 300 square feet per person. If we have an assembly occupancy, we could have 15 square feet per person, a much more densely populated building, if you will.
Okay.
So those are the differences between types of occupancies. And the code regulates these occupancies so that we don't get, for example, a paint manufacturing facility with a daycare center beside it. You could have that if the paint manufacturing, which is dangerous occupancy, if it was small enough in relation to the size of the rest of the building. So that's how the code regulates what can go in a building.
Okay, so we're looking at, I think, if what I was able to dig around and find today is correct, about 47,000 square feet?
I believe that is correct, yes.
All right. So is that all going to be batting cages?
No. About 2/3 of the lower level will be batting cages. The second floor, it's currently designated as a second floor, not a mezzanine, will be all businesses. And then 1/3 of the first floor, the other third, will be an F occupancy, which means similar to a factory.
Okay.
That is, it's actually a crematorium, but a crematorium is,
Is that currently there?
it is under construction.
Okay.
So, and a crematorium and a baseball batting cage facility aren't conflicting uses, much like a paint facility? I mean, is there any fire hazard or anything to the participants?
They have sprinklers.
They are not compatible uses, and they do require separation. The code designates what kind of separation they need to have depending on the perceived danger between the two of them. So this will have a 1-hour occupancy separation. So there is a separation between the two uses.
Okay, so the uses will not be happening at the same time?
They're at the same time, and they're in the same building, but they are physically separated by a wall which will prevent the spread of fire for at least 1 hour.
Oh, I see.
That's the way the wall is designed to do.
I see. That's what you mean by 1 hour. All right. There are currently several doors around this building, so I'm assuming there will be some construction on this building, because there is, on one side, there's a solid loading dock door, and then on another side, I think there are 3 garage doors.
Yes.
And so are there going to be construction to close off those doors? Do we know?
There will be very little exterior construction. As I said, 2/3 of the area are consumed by the batting cages, and those doors will just remain unused.
Oh, okay.
On the south side of the building, there's overhead doors, and those will be continued to use to make deliveries to them.
All right. I'm almost done here.
It's okay, I have a couple questions. so-
Okay, looking at, so all the batting cages are interior?
Yes,
None of them are going to be exterior?
that's correct.
Okay. Parking, do we have any concerns about capacity of parking? Do we know how many batting cages are going to be there?
We do, and we checked with the planning department, and the parking appears to be adequate, and if it is not, I believe the planning department is going to ask for proof of parking. It may be a couple short. They're going to ask for proof of parking, and there is adequate
Okay.
area on the property to
Well,
provide that.
anytime I've been down around that building, this area has been pretty much quiet. Beaver's Pond Press is down there. There may be one other business in that building that I've seen, but otherwise it looks pretty much vacant. So once they get this in, it'll maybe be a little more active. It's just a cinder block building is all it is.
Yeah.
So, all right, Steve, thank you very much. I had some curiosities about it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Question, once we give it this, does it go with the use or does it go with the building?
let me think about that for a second. It remains with the building as long as that building needs that designation. So if the A occupancy were to go away, we could then remove the agreement. Am I correct on that, Roger? Okay.
So, Roger, take me one step further. So if all of a sudden batting cages aren't a financial way of life, but the Church of the Great Roller Hills decides that this would be a great place to hold their, does that assembly occupancy allow them to do that, and can they just move in? It doesn't have to be a church. I'm just trying to pick a different thing that would bring in potentially a lot of people.
Surrounding yard.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
So they could just move in. What are other things that could just move in? You
Well,
know,
the only reason I hesitated, they'd also have to comply with the other zoning ordinance requirements.
Right.
Whether that use is allowed in that building on that
Okay.
property.
you know, I just, whenever we do something like this, and I'm not opposed to doing it, you always want to look down the road and think, okay, when we allow this, what door are we opening that we can't close later on? That's not going to work for our community. So that's sort of the question. Is there a door we're opening, Mr. Kirschman, that?
Well, I believe that we are allowing more uses in the building now. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come, and it doesn't necessarily allow all uses, but it would allow assembly uses. Well, let me reword that.
Wasn't there a school, wasn't Sobriety High, is that in the same?
No, it was in that area, but
Okay.
not on that.
Because it would seem like it would have the same requirement, this assembly.
Well, school's
Occupancy.
not an assembly area, or Sobriety High wasn't, because they didn't have a large assembly space. They were an E occupancy. But you're
Okay.
right in
Okay.
that because of the ratio that's required for the occupancies, an E occupancy, educational occupancy, could require the same thing. I don't know without having the code book in front of me. But so it's really a ratio that is driving this 60-foot open yard agreement. If the ratio were smaller, we had less assembly and more F or B occupancy, then that wouldn't be required. So the open yard gives them more flexible use of the building.
Attorney Kinston, are you comfortable with what we're doing as a long-term option for allowing this use?
From the building code perspective, absolutely, and I don't see any real issues with it. I mean, your zoning ordinance controls what can happen
Right.
in that building. This is just like if you have any other building that's built for a particular occupancy, someone else,
Sure.
one occupant can move out, another occupant can move in as long as they meet the zoning ordinance and it satisfies the building code requirements.
And Planner Teague?
Yeah, these uses are all permitted. It's just right now we're working with them they may need to provide a few more parking spaces on the site.
Member Brenda, oh, I'm sorry, do you have another question? Member Bennett?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Director Teague, one of the things that is focused on in this community in terms of development, redevelopment of existing properties is the impact on residents. How close is this to the nearest residential property?
Boy, I don't know off the top of my head, but it would be the north side of 70th Street. How close that is, it would be, I would venture maybe 1,000 feet.
Thank you.
Actually, probably the closest building is the senior residence, Gramercy, right on the corner.
Formerly Gramercy.
Because that's just on the other side of the creek, really, from this. Okay. So do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second? I'll second it so we can get a vote on it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah. And Josh, the traffic safety report.
Thank you, Member Swenson. Director Hool, I'm looking at Section A2 when we're talking about the approval of crosswalks at Park Lawn, Edinburgh Way, and 76th Street and Edinburgh Way. Just wondering, do we have crosswalk marking standards in terms of what are recommended in this type of setting? And the reason why I ask is I know there are many seniors in the area, and it occurs to me that perhaps wider markings with some type of enhanced visibility or pattern would function well for the population.
Yep. Councilmember Sprague and council members, there's basically two different types of crosswalk markings that we use. One is a painted on with the reflective beads that we put on when the paint is still wet. That's been a typical crosswalk marking. Typically those are put on streets that are have aged some, that have been around for a while, that we cannot put on the other type of pavement markings that we've put on the two newest projects, West 70th Street and West 44th Street, which is a Duraprint type of crosswalk. A Duraprint is where they have a new pavement, they heat up the pavement with the infrared burners, press a pattern into the pavement, take that pattern out, take the same pattern that they have as a crosswalk material with the reflective beads already into it, and then melt that into the pavement so it actually sits a little bit lower than the top of the pavement so it doesn't wear off over time. We put that type of crosswalk in just east of City Hall here about 6-7 years ago, and it's just finally starting to wear off in the wheel pass itself. In this area, we're going to look at, see if we can put in that type of a Duraprint crosswalk, and we haven't analyzed, or I don't know what the answer is if the pavement is new enough that we can put that in. If it is, we will put that in. If not, we'll put in the painted style until we redo it with a mill and overlay on the roadways, and at that time we'll put that in. Because like I say, without redoing the pavement, you can't put in the Duraprint. It just doesn't. The technique doesn't allow it to do it that way.
So for painted crosswalks, are there particular standards or patterns that we use?
Yes, we use a block pattern, and typically you do that because you try to fit the blocks between the wheel paths so so it doesn't wear out as quickly.
And then a width, standard width?
It'd be a standard width. If we see a lot of pedestrian traffic, then you'd want to widen out the crosswalk beyond the 8 to 10 foot normal crosswalk width. But in the city of Edina, we have yet to see a big group of pedestrians crossing at one time where you need a wider crosswalk.
Okay. Section C, 1, Benton. So, trying to read my own notes here. This is Benton's being studied by the BETF right now, and they're prioritizing their roadway segments that they want to have striped. So how will this request connect with their prioritization?
Yep. Councilmember Sprague and Council, I just received from the Bike Edina Task Force their recommendation for priorities for upcoming year for striping of bike lanes and routes and such. And my next step is to bring this to the Transportation Commission, have them review it. And that's where these two would be, besides being at a staff level, they would merge, but it would merge at the Transportation Commission level.
Okay, great. And then 2 and 4 both relate to Morningside pedestrian issues. And I know that we spent a lot of time in the Northeast study working on the country club area, but is there going to be a chance to revisit pedestrian circulation in that area outside of the country club district, so White Oaks and Morningside?
Yes, absolutely. We still have on our to-do list is the feasibility study for the sidewalk on 42nd Street. And then also, along with that, we'd be looking at the request for these stop lines also.
And I also note that Sunnyside isn't that where we put the temporary pad?
Yep.
Okay, yep. For a driver. So I know that the speeds there are quite high. So this has been referred back to the school district, but will we have any role in taking a look at this area as well?
We will, and we still owe a study at Grimes and Sunnyside to look at that for stop signs and marked pedestrian crossings there.
Perfect. That's all I have.
Member Brindle, did you have something?
I do on this one, talking about the style of the crosswalk on section A2 back to the area around Park Lawn and Edinburgh Way. There are crosswalks that are part of the promenade. Is this going to be that style of crosswalk with any lights?
No, at the Park Lawn and 76th Street, we actually have a warrants for that would warrant a lighting system like that. And that at Hazelton and the Promenade it actually brought it up to that level to have that type of lighting system, similar to what we have down on 51st and Halifax with that lighting system there. So no, in this location, until you have more pedestrians, it wouldn't warrant a flashing lighting system.
So we should call the residents at 7500 York and say, get out there, so that we can have a crosswalk that has more visibility, because this is a high-traffic area, and for people to respect that crosswalk, we really have to make it apparent. And so I think it would behoove anybody who wants that crosswalk to be there to walk a lot, and to to get out there and prove that we need to have as much visibility of it for it as possible. So
I don't disagree with that. I also think that we had a marketing campaign or educational program for stopping for people in crosswalks, and we have to bring that back every few years to get people that it's state law. If somebody is in a crosswalk or at an intersection that's not even marked, that you need to stop for them to.
it's been one of my ideas with the police department to have a blitz,
Yeah, exactly.
crosswalk blitz.
Not just crosswalk, but many public safety and traffic issues. That we met with Chief Long, and we talked about doing more public education campaigns and using our communication facility to get the information out there and raise awareness. And I think we talked about maybe doing a monthly campaign on different topics, and one of which could be, say, pedestrian safety. So I'd like to resurrect that idea.
Might be fun.
Yeah.
We could make fun out of it. So, and that enhances anybody's learning.
Okay. Member Bennett.
Couple of quick follow-up questions. With respect to the crosswalk that both Member Sprague and Member Brindle have asked about, I believe that Director Houle, that you mentioned the possibility of widening the crosswalk if there are more pedestrians. Can you widen the stripes? If that Dura print is not possible because of the age of the asphalt, is there any other way to alter just the paint application so that it makes it a more visible crosswalk?
We'll take a look at that. I mean, I can't promise it right now without analyzing it, but we'll take a look at it and see what we can do to make it more visible. Yeah.
Understanding the age of the pedestrians and the age of the motorists in the area. And then also with respect to Benton Boulevard, it's my understanding, and I did a double check on this, that there is actually sidewalk in the comprehensive plan shown to be built on an eastern segment of that. There is sidewalk, I believe, to Hanson Road or to the railroad, but missing to the east, and probably some work needed on what exists to the west of Hanson. So will sidewalk also be looked at this in addition to bike? When can we look for sidewalk on Benton Boulevard?
Staff hasn't been, to my knowledge, been directed to do a feasibility on the sidewalk at that location. We can, if you'd like us to, we can add it to our list, but our list is fairly long. But we can look at that. Right now we would be just looking at the bike routes itself, unless you direct us to do so.
So after, perhaps during council comments, then we can have a motion on the sidewalk, because I do think it's an important route, again, to schools and to park. And finally, last question. Requests that do not meet warrants. For example, the request for stop signs at Drew and Fuller, understanding that warrants are state law, not simply a standard in the community. Is there something else that residents who have concerns about pedestrian movement or perceived safety in the area, where do they go next?
I would say that if a resident has concern about pedestrian safety, is to go to the Transportation Commission and see if the Transportation Commission can take a look at that area, with obviously the help of staff to do that. But to answer your question, that's out we have in place right now for that. I know there might be something coming up as far as looking at a pedestrian plan and funding for plans, so in the near future. But that would be my recommendation, is to at least get it and keep it on the radar screen as far as a pedestrian issue.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion for this?
I will move it.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and Mayor Hovland, you are back in charge.
Thank you. All right, the next portion of the agenda deals with special recognitions and presentations. I don't believe we have any this evening, so we'll move on to community comment, which is the next section of the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council with respect to a particular concern? Yes, sir. And be mindful, I think, of what Ms. Benarat said. You've got 3 minutes, and you'll get a yellow light when you have 30 seconds left to give you a fair warning.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. You can give us your name and address, please.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Doug Benner. I live at 7025 Sally Lane. On October 14th, my wife Jill and I received a letter from the city stating we had 30 days to cut down all of our approximately 30 trees along Valley View Road. Needless to say, we were alarmed by this. Not only would it be expensive, it would ruin our yard, and it would impair the safety of the children playing in it. And there's no reason to do it. We felt we had to hire legal counsel for help, and we've done that at our own expense. And we've hired a traffic engineering firm to study the matter, also at our own expense. And we've determined 3 things for your consideration. The first is there's no legal basis for the letter from the city. The second is that the trees were planted there 19 years ago at the city's recommendation. And third, we offer 2 actions to improve safety at the intersection. There isn't really time in 3 minutes to describe the background to all this and present the findings of the traffic engineering firm. So we put it all in a letter to you, along with a letter from the previous homeowner and a copy of the sightline study conducted by the traffic engineer. We delivered the package yesterday, so hopefully you have it in your materials now. And I know it may take you some time to read through it, so I just wanted to request one thing tonight, and that is that the city rescind the letter of October 14th, right here, right now, and then review the contents of the package we delivered and agree with our 2 recommended actions. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Benner. All right. Is there anyone else that wishes to approach the council with regard to a particular comment or a concern? Hearing no one and seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is reports and recommendations. First matter is Resolution 2011-1112, accepting various donations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, we adopt Resolution 2011-112, accepting various donations. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. We have one solitary donor this reporting period to the Edina Art Center, Kay Peltier, and some glass art was donated. Next matter is neighborhood identification public engagement process, and our relatively new Assistant City Manager, Karen Kurt, has this matter. Karen?
Thank you, Mayor Hovland, and I still feel very, very new, for the record. The council had previously directed staff to start to work on a framework for supporting neighborhood associations in the city of Edina. And we've prepared a recommendation in terms of how we would approach the public engagement process for the identification of neighborhood boundaries and neighborhood names. And so what I outlined in the report that you have here tonight is a 2-tier engagement process. The first tier would involve an oversight group. That would be a group of 8 to 10 individuals that would have a special interest in designing public engagement processes. And it would also be a group that would be sort of charged with the overall city objective in terms of formulating a plan for neighborhood boundaries and names for the entire city. It would be part of that group's charge then to engage citizen teams to assist them in their mission. Those citizens teams then would be open to any interested citizen who had a desire to participate. And one of the things that I attached then to the report was one model in terms of how this might work, and I named it the quadrant model. And basically on that model then, the oversight group would kind of design the engagement process. We would divide the city up into 4 quadrants based on highways 162, and then engage citizens teams in each of those quadrants, work with those teams to look at their geographic area, catalog the institutions that currently exist, and then to work towards some sort of consensus with regard to that, again, that geographic area. The oversight group then would bring together the data from each of those quadrants and then make a proposal for the citywide design.
Start with Member Sprague. Questions for System Manager Kurt?
Oh, we're just at questions, not discussions.
Or comment?
Okay, well, just that we had talked about modeling the oversight group on the Communications Advisory Committee, which was a group, it's just people made application to the city manager, and then there was no finite number of people. It just kind of organically grew to, how many people total were on that committee? About 15?
Yeah, somewhere in the 12 to 15 range.
So I favor that type of process where you're in charge, we make a call for applications, and we each may have certain people we want to get involved, and they can apply to you. And then you'll assemble the cast. Maybe 8 to 10 is too few. Maybe you'll have 15 excellent applicants. And then you'll assemble the cast, and then from there take charge of the proceedings, and then they can meet and go through the steps that are outlined here. And in terms of the second, so that would be option 3 on your checklist of options. And then for the quadrant meetings, I think that's an excellent idea. And Member Bennett reminded me at coffee the other day that was an excellent model that worked well during the comprehensive plan, and we had great attendance. And I just love that idea. So that's my point of view.
All right. Member Swenson, we'll go right down the line.
Okay. I love the quadrant concept because it kind of brings your neighborhood smaller. I would like to see the groups as quadrant groups, however, because I think that's a good way, 1, to get that neighborhood process going, because you've already got that synergy in your quadrant, and 2, that's your home office. You know your quadrant. You walk it. You do whatever in it. So I just think it's more effective if we have people in quadrants deciding what their neighborhoods would be if they had a neighborhood organization.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Yes, thank you. I too think that the quadrant idea is a very, very good one. And I think, Member Swenson, that if I may, I think that that is what is being proposed. I thought about it in similar terms earlier today. Should it start at a quadrant level? And I thought then you don't have a standardization. You don't have a baseline for public process. So maybe having that baseline established for public process, which we had with Grandview. There was, as you recall, council discussion and sort of a loose framework established of how that process would work. It actually got refined at its very first meeting, I think very successfully, and it turned into an all-comers process with the community advisory team. We've had more praise for that process than probably any other. But again, the quadrant meetings were very heavily attended, very well attended for the comp plan. So possibly a hybrid that, again, there's a starting point and kind of a baseline established. We had talked about a survey as well, and I think in terms of figuring out what's available, yes, you can definitely do that within quadrants, and maybe you do surveying through quadrants, but if it relies simply on the people who become involved, I think you might miss something. I think that open casting call or that open invitation for people to as I look through my files, I find pieces of correspondence where people call themselves a neighborhood association. I think not on the model that we're thinking of, but there are groups out there, and they may not be known to others even within their own neighborhoods or quadrants, because it may be just a couple of buildings in a multi-unit development. It may be a couple of blocks in a larger neighborhood. So I still favor the survey. I do favor the quadrant. What comes in between, I favor that self-selection. I think it has served us well. It also enables people to become involved who don't have time to serve on a board or commission. They don't have time to be involved in a longer effort, but they can see themselves involved very effectively in a project with a shorter time span.
Can I ask, then, can we flesh out one question? So you have the Neighborhood Identification Oversight Group, initial group.
Yep.
Are those members each then on a quadrant team? Do they lead a quadrant team? How are you getting this communication from them where you say you want all the guidelines to be set ahead of time down to your quadrant teams? If you don't just pick quadrant teams, put them all together in a meeting, give them all the rules of the road, and then send them out?
That's an excellent question, and maybe one of the things that could be used in criteria for selection of whether it's called a steering committee, an advisory group, could be that there be quadrant representation, that there be quadrant distribution, which we've looked at. So if you have 18 applications come forward, maybe 8 people coming from the 4 quadrants, and then you decide what other number you need and whether the skills fit with what you need for a group.
I don't know if that criteria is completely relevant at the beginning. I mean, geographic should not be. I think the criteria you laid out were interest in designing and facilitating public engagement process, strong community knowledge, exposure to local government civic process, and advocates of a citywide objective. And to me, segmenting it into geographics from the beginning is the wrong approach. First, you have this broad-based committee. And they're going to self-select because they will be interested in this endeavor, just like they were for the CAC. And so they'll come forward, you'll decide what the right number is based on how many applicants and their qualifications based on those criteria. You'll assemble the group, and then once assembled, they'll define the framework for the rest of for the phase 2, let's call it, for the quadrant process. And then you roll out from there. So
all I see on this is determining neighborhood boundaries and names. I don't see any part of this piece of paper that talks about the rules for developing. I thought we were just talking about how you want to divide out your community to make neighborhood associations. Nowhere in this document do I see anything that talks about how to start the neighborhood association, what your rules should be, or anything like that. So I think we're talking about 2 different things here. If you want to combine the 2, that's fine. All I'm talking about is a group to get together to say, if we're going to have neighborhood associations, where are the neighborhoods, what will their names potentially be? Let's identify them at least initially until they've met. And then put together, and you could use the quadrant leaders and outside people to put together then the core of what you want to do. But this thing here, to me, just is neighborhood identification, not how to form the group. So am I confused? Because I hear you talking about rules for forming the group, and that's why you want this initial large group, and I think we're making this really way too convoluted.
I think you misunderstood or I misspoke, but I do understand what you're saying. And actually, I think the idea of having some kind of model structure going forward that people could easily adapt could be a form of low-cost city support. But that wasn't what I was talking about, but I do also understand that what you're talking about, what this document describes is more the process of establishing the boundaries, using people in the quadrants to advise.
Let's let Member Brindle get in this conversation, too.
Thanks. We're talking top-down and down-top as well. And there are established associations, formal and informal, throughout our city. Along Sally Lane, there's an association. All the homes back up to a backwash of 9 Mile Creek, and they're all interested in maintaining that and making sure the water stays where it belongs, and that the brush, trees, and a variety of things. So the needs and wants of that association are really part of what has created And I'm looking at the last page, the outcomes, the desired outcomes. And that really is going to drive why this structure is going to be what it's going to be. My question is, how many meetings have happened so far? And have residents given any input yet, or are we still in the theory stage?
We are still very much in the theory stage.
Okay, because talking to some of the neighbors, not that they don't even know that this is on our desk tonight, I don't think. But I'm just talking with them about, when did you form your association, why? And I mean, do you have parties, or is it just something that helps you maintain your property along that backwash? And they took their model from some of the areas that are along Minnehaha Creek, and how those neighborhoods manage together their property lines along the creek, and what the needs are, what the challenges are that they deal with. So I think it's a win-win for any neighborhood that wants to be part of it. I don't think the whole city's going to buy into it. I think there are individual neighbors who will opt out of being in an association where their neighbors are part of it. I think it's an individual decision, but it's one from a crime prevention standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from knowing where your neighbors in need reside, and those needs are temporary and permanent. I think it's a very good thing for the small neighborhood, and looking at it from a city standpoint, I think it strengthens us as well. So I think it's a great idea.
So that's talking about the merits of the policy itself. Yep. In terms of the process, what I just heard Member Bennett and Member Swenson say was that they're a little confused as to how this two-step process works. This is how I boil it down. Only one. Okay. Well, this is how I think it should work. Let's just walk away from the document for a second. We need a steering committee. I like steering committee. We need a neighborhood association steering committee to sit down and develop, facilitate the public engagement process, which should happen in quadrants. That's what I hear coming from the document, and I think that's a good idea. So they would facilitate the public engagement process, and then eventually they would come up with a recommendation, I would think. So it's really only one committee of people. How would that committee be selected? I would suggest the same way that the Communications Advisory Committee was done. We do the casting calls. Member Bennett says, you vet the applications. This is your baby, so you just guide this along. You vet the applications. You put together however many interested people you can, and then away you go. I thought that's how we imagined it to begin with.
So in the desired outcome under the top identification oversight group, it's to make recommendations to the city county regarding neighborhood boundaries and names.
Correct.
For these different communities.
Yep.
Okay. And then the people serving underneath and the boundaries bring their name, they bring their group up to this oversight group, or whatever form the oversight group wants them to?
No,
this sounds like a lot of...
During the quadrant engagement process, many people will come and engage and talk about, I belong to this neighborhood and our boundary's this, and there'll be discussions about the boundary lines, and they'll gather from each quadrant meeting that information into, and then form a consensus recommendation.
So you want this neighborhood identification oversight group to go to each quadrant and work with them, and not set up separate teams in each quadrant, but just work with the quadrants?
Just have a quadrant meeting, just like we did.
Okay, that isn't really what this is then.
No, it is a change of what's here, but hearing it described, I think it actually could work very well and avoid
lack of clarity from the public side.
Avoids sort of becoming mired in layers. At the same time, what Member Brindle has described of people, that description that people give of when they formed, how they formed, what activities they have, that's really important information to capture. Whether it's done in a survey or whether it's done in quadrant meetings. And quadrant meetings alone won't capture it because not everybody will be available at the same time and able to come to the same place. So there have to be other ways for people to...
So the Neighborhood Identification Oversight Group has a big job. The people that show up for their quadrant meeting have what I would consider a modest job.
As with the comp plan, you had the planning commissions.
I just want to identify the work scope kind of what we expect, because this doesn't say here that this oversight group would come to every quadrant meeting, and it doesn't say that the quadrants really wouldn't have citizen teams, they would just have citizen participants. So, I mean, you're describing a little bit different process than right here.
I'm trying to keep it simple, but also effective, and to me, having the quadrant, having quadrant meetings to gather the information collectively from citizen participants is the right idea. But you have one body facilitating the whole process that then comes up with a recommendation, and away we go. And the phase one is do the survey, phase two is put the team together, and then phase three is hold the meetings.
What do you survey?
What Member Bennett has referenced many times in terms of existing neighbor associations.
Before Member Bennett answers, I see
I think our goal here was this. I hope this doesn't sound like overkill, because I think that one of the things we've learned from St. Louis Park and our discussions with them is you have to be really careful to make sure you engage people from the very beginning in establishing the geography and the names, because if you get that part wrong, it's going to could go wrong from there on out. We tried not to be too prescriptive about exactly what the steering committee is going to do. There may be interactive online maps, or there may be other mapping kind of things where people can draw, and there may be surveys, but we haven't outlined that in this proposal yet. There should be some room for that group to be creative and to bring some ideas, but really it's all about creating the group that's going to make a recommendation back to you.
Well, and that's why I'm hesitant to send a survey out before that group meets.
Let me give my thoughts here, too.
Sorry.
Here's what I like, here's what I worry about. I like the notion of option 3 that you suggested. I like the idea that a city staff team interviews and selects an advisory group that is confirmed by the city council. I think we ought to have a continuing role in what that big group looks like. So that gives me some comfort that we have a role there. I like the idea of then having that neighborhood identification oversight group. We got to get a different name. That NIOG is that's a bad acronym, NIOG. That they design an engagement and consensus building process. I'd like to see them come back to us actually with their ideas on how the process ought to work, because what I worry about downstream, and I think this is what Member Swenson is kind of getting to, is that I think people in a quadrant ought to have a say, and that they ought to be treated like a team. But if we can't get enough people from each quadrant, then I worry about some other entity deciding what's best for each part of town, and I'm not sure that gets us where we want to be. So there's little points along the way where I worry about adequate citizen participation on a broad geographic basis, because we're not the same in every part of town.
That would be true.
And so you know, let them design it and bring it back to us, and then let's kind of keep our eye on it and make sure that it's going kind of the way we think it ought to go, so that we get that broad participation that everybody cares about. And if we don't see that, then we better kind of regroup and figure out what to do. But let's just, I think you were suggesting this too, let's not get too, let's not micromanage this thing right now. Let's just give it a broad brush approach. Get a team picked, have them come back to us with the idea of how they think they ought to function, kind of like what we did with the small area plan.
Yeah, they may want to survey at the beginning. They may want to survey more towards the end when they've got more people and they've got more engagement. And
I just thought that a survey, again, if the goal is to involve a lot of people, understanding the points, I've heard the points, but I think why I was recommending a survey early rather than later is it is a way to let people know that this process is underway. Not everybody gets the Sun Current. Not everybody watches cable channel 16, and so it's one more form of information.
My worry is that we're using a high cost of a survey to do outreach when we may want other information, and we've already done the survey, and I see Director Benner.
I wasn't using survey in the decision resources sense.
No, okay.
I had been very specific before.
Okay.
Well, this was not necessarily even a paper survey. It was one that people could, it was more the nature of an open
Over and see what Director Benner has to say.
Keep in mind that our new website content management system will allow for a built-in form of online polling we can take advantage of early in 2012.
Cool.
I'd like to make
be
a
an
motion.
easy, cost-effective way to do it.
Can I make a motion? Can I try?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to move that we go forward with option 3, city staff team led by Karen Kurt interviews and selects an advisory group that is confirmed by the city council, and that committee determine its name other than Neighborhood Identification Oversight Group.
They may like that name.
And that committee determine their initial name. That's my motion.
And that they come back to us with a recommendation as to the engagement process
And
to
that
be utilized.
the initial committee come back to the city council with an initial recommendation on process.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. Next matter is Manager Neal's deals with Hennepin County Open to Business Program.
At the last council meeting, I gave you a brief summary about this program. The county approached us to see what our level of interest was. Because of the timing of the deadline to submit a letter of interest or an application, I had to do that prior to getting the council's formal approval of that application. If the council approves that application tonight, the application is in good standing. If you don't, then we would withdraw the application. It is matching dollars, so $5,000 from the county and $5,000 from the city. And I think the application describes, briefly anyway, what the city would receive for that contribution.
What criteria would be used for individuals and businesses that would like to take advantage of the services offered by this program?
As I have had a discussion with the county staff and with the vendor staff that they use to carry out this program, in that conversation, I learned that their criteria is very generous, I think, if I could characterize it somehow. Their idea is to meet with anybody about any idea, and if it appears that there's not sufficient aptitude on behalf of the person they're meeting with, or perhaps they just need greater assistance, or they need somebody else, some other kind of assistance, they'll refer them on. But if it's somebody in our community that has a bona fide idea and maybe has some level of business acumen to carry it out, this consultant will help them with a business plan and help them get financing and help them get started.
And is there a fee to the resident or business that is taking part in this receiving services?
For the initial service, I don't believe that there is. I don't know that that's indicated in there, but I don't believe that there is. There could be fees down the line if there is a financing, but for that kind of initial intake meeting, where you get the chance to meet with somebody about your business plan and how well you've thought this idea through, there is not a fee for that.
Member Swenson?
Is this $5,000 a year?
It is $5,000 a year. Right?
And then pretty much just looks like this isn't a program that gives money to businesses to start up. This is a program that helps them come up with a business plan and meet with institutions that might be able to fund them and things like that.
That's correct. Right.
So, I mean, there are a couple of things. There's one that does that. I can't remember the name of it right now, at least in the western suburbs, using ex-executives from large corporations.
SCORE.
SCORE, thank
Yep.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Is this similar to something like that?
It is similar to that.
Okay.
I know here on the back it says the new economic development director is going to oversee the program and determine whether we're getting good ROI for the entrepreneurs. But I also think it will be very effective being done in partnership with the chamber. They have many different outreach groups to existing members and new members, like the ambassadors, who will go out to all the newly signed up businesses and could bring a brochure or some information on this program to the business if they're within Edina.
Yeah, I would think that the chamber would be a key ally in spreading the news about this potential service.
All right. Member Brindle.
So $5,000 matching per year for 2 years, right? Because the term of this is January 1st, 2012, end date December 31st, 2013. So that's 2 years.
It is 2 years, that is right.
Yeah,
That's
so it's a
right.
2-year program.
It is 2 years, and I believe the county's commitment is also for 2 years as well.
Okay.
That's right.
So are there incentives that, I suppose, there's a lot in this program that has yet to be designed and put in place?
Well, I would say the program itself is already in place and
Okay.
has been in Brooklyn Park and Minnetonka and I believe Hopkins. I know that it is 2 years, however, they do understand that we have a year-to-year budget, so we did have that,
Oh, yeah.
discussion.
Okay.
So
All right.
if we don't see there's any value of it created in year one, we are not committed to year two.
Okay. Funds are available at one time. What kind of incentives what are other cities doing to incent small businesses to locate in their city?
There's a variety of things that they can do. They can provide subsidies on the utility side. We talked a little bit about our utility budgets tonight.
Okay.
There are some cities that create an incubator environment where the city and perhaps the county come together and own a building that has a variety of small office space, and they share utilities, they share overhead, they may even share receptionists. We can provide startup assistance to them through various state grants that we have access to as well.
Okay, great. Well, this is exciting. I'd love to see it happen.
Do we have a motion?
Second?
Been moved and seconded, we approve the grant application to Hennepin County for the Open to Business program. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next matter is, I think we've received a petition against the Valley Estates Neighborhood Street Reconstruction Project. So we have with us tonight Dan McElroy with the Minnesota Restaurant Association. And Dan, welcome, former mayor of Burnsville and former commissioner of the Department of Employment and Economic Development. On to a new phase of life with the Minnesota Restaurant Association, and they have a concern about Section 900.12, Subdivision 7 of our code. So, Dan, come on up and tell us what the concern of the association is.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The Restaurant Association has a variety of members, most of which are restaurants with liquor licenses. And Edina has a provision in its liquor ordinance prohibiting happy hour type promotions and the discounting of alcohol. This is the only community in the state that has a provision like that. And there are competitors in surrounding communities that aren't under those restrictions. We would hope to have a discussion with staff. We've had some preliminary discussions with staff about potential modification to the ordinance that would continue to maintain the restaurant style. We do not believe that the current 60/40 provision should be changed. The members that we have here do not operate dance clubs or nightclubs or that kind of thing. They're very much restaurant operators. But it is challenging to compete with surrounding communities that operate under different rules. And so we look forward, Mayor, perhaps for an opportunity to have a discussion about potential changes.
All right.
Yes.
Questions for Dan?
Ms. Mangan, of our liquor license that we give, they have to give a report of what percentage is food and what percentage is alcohol. How many of them are close to the 60/40 split?
Councilmember Swenson, Mayor and Council, I have to admit that I haven't looked at those since last March.
Okay.
And so I would say maybe 3 or 4.
There is one concern that I would just voice ahead of time on this, is that if you have a provision that you can only keep your liquor license if you sell a minimum of 60% food, and that we would allow a change for happy hour, and that the 3 or 4 restaurants that are close to 60% fall below that, I would say that they would feel that that would be unfair too. So I'm welcome to discuss this further, but we have kind of a unique rule in our liquor license as to the proportion of food versus alcohol you have to sell. And as you probably know, we haven't had liquor license here other than country clubs for more than, what is it now, 11 years? 12?
1998, I think.
98, okay. 13 years. That's all I'm asking.
All right. I think the issue that we should be thinking about as a council to save time for our staff is, do we think it's worthwhile for our staff to have a conversation with the Restaurant Association folks about this issue and then come back to the council with some recommendations?
Can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
For Attorney Knudsen or for Clerk Mangan, does our present code prohibit the use of sale prices on food during certain hours of the day? That was question number 1. The other question is, does our current code prohibit, for instance, a wine of the month or some other special that's not linked to time, but that is around during the hours that the business is open?
Member Bennett, Mayor and Council, our current ordinance does not have any restrictions on sale prices on food. However, correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Knudsen, what it now states is, as far as the discounting of any type of liquor, there is no 2-for-1, there is no reduction of anything that is not on the then price menu. So if you wanted to have a special wine, it has to be on your regular menu.
All the time.
All the time. Not during a particular time of day, not during a particular month. It's on your menu.
Although you can reprint, as we've noticed, menus have changed and they're not big.
So you could do a wine of the month, print the menus for that month, and then offer it on full price based on the menu, but you can't for the day change it and then.
Correct. I believe that there are some entities that currently will offer a special for a particular drink on a particular day of the week, and that drink is always made with a particular brand of alcohol. It might be a lower priced than a call alcohol, if you understand what I mean. They might have a flight of wine for $10, but it's always 3 moderately priced wines instead of the higher end wines. That's how they're trying to cope with that.
Manager Neal.
I appreciate Ms. Mangan kind of outlining that particular scenario, because I think it gives you a good picture into the intricacy and the enforcement challenges of our liquor ordinance. And the reason we brought this to you tonight in sort of this open council session was we do realize that there are some sensitivities to how liquor has sort of matured in its use in the community. And if there's an interest in kind of continuing that maturation and having a discussion with the Restaurant Association about changes to the ordinance perhaps, we want to get a go-ahead from you on that. If in your judgment you think that what we have is fine just the way we have it, you can let us know that too, and we can work with Mr. McElroy on that issue as well.
I would like to move that staff come forward with a recommendation on this topic.
All right. Is there a second? I'll second it.
Yeah, okay.
So the question is, the motion is that the council would request staff to look at the issue of discounting of the sale of alcohol during certain times of the day.
That's correct.
Yeah. How many restaurants have we opened up in our community in the last number of years? I'm sorry, I'm not really excited about this, and I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm not very excited about it. I don't, other than the strip maybe across from Bloomington where there are a few restaurants, the majority of the new restaurants, I mean, they've all opened. There's one that's closed and another, the same restaurateur now has 3 in our community. If this was a bad community for for doing business, I don't think that would happen. So I'm going to vote against it, and that's why. I I really don't, I think the can of worms that you open when you have a 60-40 rule, and then I can see Mayor Hupkins saying no.
I'm just
so-
thinking.
We're not making a.
Well, I'm going to vote in favor of it because I think we ought to at least look at the issue and see whether we're putting our restaurants on that vital corner at 50th and France and down France Avenue, adjacent to Bloomington, at a competitive disadvantage. And we still have the underlying rule. We're not a bar town. We're a restaurant town that serves alcohol as an adjunct to food. And we can maintain that, I think, with that 60-40 rule. But there are times during the day, I would guess probably from 3 to 6 in the afternoon, or 3 to 5, when things are slow and maybe there could be something done other than discounting food. And I think, frankly, I wish they would believe in that concept advanced by McCormick and Schmick, where Mr. Schmick told me they make a lot more money off discounting food and selling drinks at full price than they would discounting drinks. But nonetheless, I think we ought to at least look at the issue again. That's all I'm suggesting, is that we at least look at it.
Yeah, can you call the question?
Member Brindle, you want to comment first? You haven't had a chance to weigh in here.
Well, it is
Bennett.
the restaurants at 50th and France that I have personally heard from the most regarding this. And I will be curious to see if, just what it is that comes out as a conclusion in the staff discussion. So I would like to have the staff discussion. And just hearing what Clerk Mangan said makes me wonder, do you have a menu that goes from 3 to 6 in the afternoon, and then another menu, like you have a breakfast menu and a dinner menu, you have a lunch menu and a dinner menu. Do you actually have a menu that goes from 3 to 6 and defines the prices during that period of time, and then the other menu and the rest of the time? It may be as simple as that based on our code. So from what I'm hearing, I'd be curious to see what the discussion comes up with.
Member Bennett.
2 quick points. I had the same thought similar to Member Swenson's, and that is we know from a parking study that's been underway this year that we are at certain times of day at 50th and France short about 200-plus parking spaces. It's been something that we've discussed. So there is success. However, it's defined. And the second point that I want to make is I have seen in articles in the Star Tribune about where stores and restaurants are located in the city of Minneapolis, that they also have a ratio rule that applies to certain business districts like Uptown. So when there is proximity to residential areas, which we certainly have with a lot of our business areas in our city, then they also have restrictions on the percentages that can be sold.
I would expect that this conversation would be real data-driven, and I know you're a data guy, Mr. McElroy. And you also cover the topic of public safety, because that's the issue that was raised before. Is there an increased risk to the safety of the public by virtue of having, I'll call it happy hour, from 3 to 6? And so that's something I'd like to have you cover with staff too. It sounds like we're going to have enough of the council voting in favor of Member Sprague's motion to at least get it to a discussion with our staff.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, none of my members would argue that Edina isn't a great place to do business. And you're certainly right that there have been restaurants added here. I hope that as Southdale continues to redevelop, there may be more opportunities for restaurants to do business here. But they do face challenging competition from areas like the West End and St. Louis Park, a new facility that opened last week in Minneapolis that is fairly promotional. But as I've talked to members, their goal is not to sell more to each guest, but to have more guests come and try the great restaurants in your community. So we would look forward to having that discussion. There are a number of communities that have 60-40 rules. That's not particularly unusual. There are some neighborhoods in Minneapolis. There are some other communities that have it. We are not arguing that should change, but looking forward to having a discussion and some flexibility on pricing.
Other questions, comments? You want to call the question? All right. All those in favor of Member Sprague's motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. We had some correspondence on the dais this evening from Mr. Benner. It was a comprehensive amount of information. Is there any other correspondence we've received that you want us to know about that we didn't get in our packets?
No, there's not.
Okay. All right. Then let's start with mayor and council comments. I know that Member Bennett had a motion issue she wanted to deal with, and I think I want to talk about Mr. Benner's situation. I know I do want to talk about it. And quickly perusing this RLK document with regard to both the Clearview and the Sightline issue, but let's hold that for the time being and start with Member Brindle, I think, this week. We're going to go with you first for council comments.
Council comments. I have a couple. Last Wednesday, October 26th, I attended the Minnesota Community Education Association meeting at the Earl Brown Center with Val Burke and Jenny Norland Weaver was there, and Marcia Buchak, Jan Mikulitz. I know I should never tell who's there because I'll forget somebody, but it was, I stayed for the morning session to hear a speaker named Margaret Wheatley. If you get a chance to hear this woman speak, I would do whatever you had to do to adjust your schedule to hear her. She is inspiring. Leading in uncertain times is really kind of the nut of what she had to say. And she really, she builds up a picture of what the situation and the economy and the time we are living in. And she sort of leads you down this road of, oh my God, I didn't know I had so many problems. But by the time you leave, she has now turned each of those into opportunities. And for example, looking at a department within the city, looking at a department within the school district, whatever, a company, or within just a situation in a family, and you say, boy, I don't know how I'm going to get myself out of this. Maybe I need to find some help. And if you really are creative and you support each other, you realize that the help is everybody in front of you. If you work together, you can find your solutions. And she was just very empowering in some very creative ways. And I was really impressed. I came home and ordered books, and we'll be pouring through those. But really, I think the essence of what she had to say is belonging. Just if everybody feels like they belong, then there is certainly a positive outcome. There's a positive approach. So as long as there is that belonging, she was very inspiring. I really appreciated the invitation from Val to attend that. The other thing that I have is an email came through from an organization that I just hear about and am going to start getting more familiar with, Growth and Justice for a Prosperous, Fair, and Sustainable Community. On Thursday, November 10th, a free and public presentation by Dr. Joyce Epstein on how school, family, and community partnerships can help improve student success. This particular session is happening at North Community High School, but I think it could happen anywhere. It could happen in a neighborhood. It could happen in a school, and I think it has potential to provide for Edina schools the same thing it's going to provide for North High School. So that. I'm going to try and get to that on the evening of November 10th. So, but it's at North High School, November 10th. The program is from 6 to 8 with a reception at 5:30. So, anyway, that's, I can't think of anything else at this point, but that's what I got.
Thank you.
Yep.
Member Bennett.
Thank you. Congratulations to the planners and conductors of the Grandview open house or community meeting last Thursday. There was a room full and a lot of new faces. So I think the publicity that was done in advance of that meeting was really successful. One takeaway is that there were some people who were very web savvy and could not find the location of the meeting and the time. They knew that the meeting was taking place. They couldn't, and one comment that they had was the page on which the information was located didn't have a click or a link in the usual place at the end. It was someplace over on the side. But they found it anyway and were happy to be there and happily participating. I know, it's coming. And then budget meeting, the Citizens League budget meeting. I attended the session this morning. It is fabulous. Very, very well conducted. Good, thought-provoking questions. Good discussion and instant results from from voting on the little handheld clickers. There is a second meeting tomorrow, 1:30 to 3:30 at the Edina Community Center, and a third meeting on Thursday evening from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Public Works Building. And I would.
Fourth event online. Sunday.
Okay. And what is the time on Sunday night?
The time has not been fixed yet, but I think it's 6 to 8 or 7 to 9 on Sunday night.
So people can go to the website and find out. But very, very worthwhile, and I really encourage people to come out for those. Finally, I did say that I would move a feasibility study for Benton Boulevard, and I will do that now. I move that staff be directed to conduct a feasibility study for a sidewalk for Benton Avenue, Benton Boulevard.
In terms of your motion, is that Benton, what part of Benton are we talking about? Because
Specifically, it's Benton from Highway 100, Trunk Highway 100, because there is sidewalk extension over the bridge. This is something that's been coming forward in pieces. There's actually stub sidewalk that comes around from the sidewalk that now runs along the frontage road, so it would be connecting the existing sidewalk on Benton Boulevard west of Trunk Highway 100.
To Benton and Hanson, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Before I second that, Director Poole, do we have a timeline for, I can't remember if Benton's on our next 4 or 5 years of street reconstruction? Because if we're on that, then I don't want to duplicate the.
Well, 5 years would be a long time to wait in that location.
That's true, but any sidewalk segment in the comp plan we could move all of them. I mean, in the same manner. We have to follow some type of.
Let me ask Member Bennett. Can I ask Member Bennett?
Construction schedule.
Was this motion motivated primarily by your concerns about safe routes to school?
Your Honor, by several things. First of all, I'm familiar with that segment of roadway, and it's occurred to me before. Second of all, we have a resident request. Third of all, we're actively looking at bike lanes. And fourth, yes, I think it does fit in safe routes to school. Normandale Elementary School, Southview Middle School, also Countryside Elementary School lies at the other end, and we just don't have the connections.
All right. Now, here's the reason I asked that question was that we had a meeting on the 25th with Superintendent Gresson and Blue Cross Blue Shield on the Dewtown project. And when we got to the issue of safe routes to schools, the superintendent said that they would like to be involved in that process because if we put in sidewalks on the safe routes to schools plan, and they don't have the funds to pay for a crossing guard, it creates problems. And so I think they would like us to coordinate that effort with them and the timing of it with them.
And one other thought is, as some of you may recall, I spent most of January of this year going through all of our old street reconstruction packets and putting together an analysis of what has and has not been built of sidewalks that were in the comprehensive plan, and some kind of prioritization by the Transportation Commission working with school district, I think would be welcome because, and needed, necessary, because we do have a lot of segments that are remaining.
We were just talking about that, but I think.
We don't have a second here, incidentally. We should have a discussion after a second. So why don't you go ahead and second it for purposes of discussion?
I'll second it.
All right.
I'm still waiting for my answer from Director Poole. Can I have that
Sure.
before we continue the
Councilmember
discussion?
Swenson, we do have a mill and overlay scheduled for 2017 on Benton Avenue between Highway 100 and Hanson Boulevard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anyhow, yes, we should have a priority schedule. We should, I don't understand why we went off like this, all these segments. Someone should comprehensively look at all of the segments, just like they're doing for the bike routes, and prioritize. But we have to also identify a secure funding source, which I guess will come up in the first quarter of next year. Once we're through the budget and everything else, we can talk about funding sources. We've talked about the utility fund before. I'm sorry, franchise fee before. And to me, that precedes the prioritization, because otherwise we could get back to this broken schedule of waiting for funding.
Can I amend my motion to request that the ETC then look at sidewalks and the comprehensive plan, and as the BETF is doing with bike facilities, create a prioritization schedule or recommendation for sidewalk construction?
I think recommendation is a nice word. Can we have that in your
Yes,
motion?
yes,
Because then I would
recommendation.
accept it as a friendly, really huge change in the motion.
So, as opposed to making two separate motions there, because.
I'm withdrawing Benton Boulevard.
We replaced it first with her second.
Oh, okay.
You're
then
comfortable
I'm
with the withdrawal of the first motion?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
You want to make another, now be mindful that you
No, that
didn't.
was, she remade
No,
the motion.
it is.
No, I don't understand that, but she excluded staff from that discussion. Did you mean to exclude staff? Because you asked the ETC to make the decision
No, I
and
meant-
recommendation.
No, recommendation.
She
I
asked them to make a
recommendation.
recommendation, and the ETC works with Jack Sullivan.
Well,
So
I think that should be clear in the motion. We don't want to exclude staff. from-
No.
Wait a
we
second,
weren't.
wait a second, Mayor. When we have the BETF prioritized, aren't they working with staff as well? I mean, that's always built in.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, well, I mean, do we have to say that every time we ask for a recommendation from a commission or board, that they work with staff?
Well, and we do have a comprehensive plan that was approved by
I
this.
don't
Wait a
think.
minute. Yeah, okay, we're still in discussion. Go ahead, finish
No,
your
I'm
thought.
just saying, I don't know that we need to put that adder onto, they are always
It's
working.
implied.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
implied.
yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I think, I would agree with that. I don't think we should do this right now. I'll tell you why. Because I think we should wait until exactly what you described occurs.
That's what we were just saying.
Is that we ought to have a clear source of funds first for
No,
this.
but we're not saying they have to put them in. We're just asking for a schedule of if we have funding, how they get put in.
Why would
one
we want to have
precede the
people
other?
work on this project of recommending to us a sidewalk strategy if we don't have the funding source?
Because then once you have the funding, you have your.
Or
you have
two,
your-
if that street comes up for reconstruction, you've already established the fact that it is a priority sidewalk street.
And which provides, clarity.
I don't think it's the end of the world that we don't have the funding source first, because at some point, we'll fund according to the priorities established. So you've moved and you've seconded and approved her amendment? Okay.
No, there is no amendment.
Oh.
It's just a separate
It's a
motion.
new motion.
I
It's a
see.
replacement
I see.
motion.
Okay.
Whichever way.
Can we call the question?
Sure. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. All right. Does that finish your comments?
Yes, thank you.
Member Swenson.
I serve on that board that has a really long name, Community Action Partnership for Suburban Hennepin County. We had a meeting last week, which Val Burke could not attend because she was doing that thing with you. But the most interesting thing on the statistics that we got, and they work a lot with federal energy funding for people who need help with their utility bills. They do foreclosure work. They are now going to work at educating the populace as to where the food banks are, the ones that need to give, actually, not necessarily just the ones that are going there, because the need has gotten so great. And the area that is expanding the most for any kind of need, not just food bank and foreclosure and utility, is the first-ring suburbs, and that is a new thing. And there's a huge change. This group only works with western suburban Hennepin County, which is why I serve on it. It's, they do fascinating work. It's really, the figures that they presented are really tough. And I think as a community, we need to keep our eyes open for this. We are a first-ring suburb. They're talking about us along with other people, other suburbs, and be mindful of what we can do and what we're asked to do and what we're asked to help with.
Thank you. Member Sprague.
You're always so fast, concise. I want to thank Assistant City Manager Karen Kurt for all of her work on neighborhood associations and the boards and commissions bylaws that you circulated out for review. Really excellent beginning, and I just wanted to thank you for that. And I also note that you stated you'd be sending out a questionnaire to boards and commissions member to get kind of a quality of life survey of them. And I think that's important. I've talked to chairs from various commissions and members, and I still think that there is some friction between commissions and City Hall. And in the areas of communications, workflow, maybe expectations. And I hope that we can improve the relationship between those two bodies through both the bylaws and also having a discussion about what their concerns are. Because we rely so heavily on the system for our recommendations and making good decisions as a council. Secondly, I want to bring up 70th again because I've been walking up and down the street talking to people, and they always have my ear, of course. And they're still, you know, as it stands right now, the street's not complete, so they're still concerned that speeds are up because there's no lane markings in, and the stoplights aren't in, and so on. And I've told them, let's wait until the street is completed before you make a judgment. But I have to reiterate again, there is an expectation that we will be policing the street to retrain the drivers and putting some resources into that. We're going, I mean, it's the nature of the street from a driver's perspective is changing significantly. And I think there will have to be some retraining on the 25 mile per hour and different pedestrians and bicyclists in the roadway and so on. So I just wanted to reiterate that because it's been mentioned again to me this week. I also want to thank all the contractors, city staff, Andrew Plowman, who's the project manager, who is just incredible. I mean, he's been so great with communications, and I've seen and heard him communicating with various residents on various minutia, and he's patient and ever present, and he's just done a great job. As well as the foreman, if that's the correct term, Blair Fowler, who's also been, what's that? The inspector, but very accessible and very quick to get back to residents, and I think that speaks well to what we're doing in our Public Works Department. Finally, someone mentioned this morning at our inaugural budget workshop the upcoming school levy referendum, and I would like to move in support of that levy referendum. I thought maybe this would come up at some point on our agenda. Everyone's looking at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah, no, I think it's a question of whether we should do, whether we can do something as a council, or you could speak to it individually. I think anyone up here could speak to it individually, but I think whether we can speak to this with one voice.
I will speak to it. The prohibition is the city cannot spend any money lobbying for or against it, or advertising for or against it. You can't do that, just as if you have your own bond referendum or something. You can't spend money lobbying for it. But the council, if you choose to, could move to support it as a group, and you can do it individually. You just can't spend any money doing it.
So I would like to move in support of the levy referendum, and because I believe it is in the best interest of our city to see the school district supported, the children to continue to have the tools to compete in the global economy. And if you looked at the charts in the levy referendums with regard to resources being allocated to technology in the district, it's quite low in relation to other school districts and takes additional money away from the general fund, and I believe that goes to the reputation of the school district and attracting people to our town. And I think there's a very significant relationship between the two.
As a member of the Community Education Services Board and the mom of 2 recent high school graduates, I will second that motion.
We have a third, fourth, and Mary, aren't you feeling kind of left out?
Sure, I'll third it.
I'll fifth it.
Okay.
All right. Well, this is our future.
Excuse me, could we just make that a unanimous motion of the council to support?
Let's do that. Let's do that. Even better.
Thank you.
And other,
A unanimous motion of the council to support the school referendum to be held next Tuesday, November 8th, 2011. Further discussion?
2 referendums. Plural.
School referenda.
Yes.
Yes, I like, I do that too.
All right. Just further discussion, all those in favor of the unanimous motion, say aye.
aye.
Or I should say the motion for unanimous support, say aye. Aye. And opposed, say nay. Carried. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. That's all I have.
Okay, good. We talked a little bit about safe routes to schools and the upcoming, it sounds like the franchise fee issue is going to come up after the first of the year. We had someone who had written to all of us with a concern over aircraft noise mitigation. I'm assuming that that correspondence has been sent off to the appropriate folks, maybe at the MAC. Anybody know? From a staff level?
I don't know that I haven't caused
If
it
so,
to. I
could
don't
we,
know if Mr. Hool has. Okay. I'm not sure that I do. Is it in the is it in tonight's packet?
Could we ask that staff contact that person and let them know that we'll forward the information on to the appropriate body at the MAC?
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, good. And then another issue before I get into what I've been engaged in the last couple of weeks. I think at least Joni and I had a phone call from a person over on Meadow. She was concerned about the drop-off on the sidewalk over on France Avenue. And the way this, I was over there Saturday, the way the new sidewalk is constructed north of 49th, on that block where Meadow is, the house is back on France Avenue. There's a large drop-off there, and I think Director Hool is going to explain to us how they're going to make walking safe over there so that people don't have to worry about slipping a leg down between a fence and the drop-off. And I would say that you've done a very nice job, Director Hool, of creating a kind of a faux stone finish on the wall for those neighbors in that particular block that backs on France Avenue. But I think we should address how you intend to handle the issue of that drop-off with appropriate fencing to keep people safe that are using the sidewalk on a pedestrian basis.
Mr. Mayor and council members, what you see here is actually a detail. First, let me back up a little bit. On this project, as you recall, it was a sidewalk project between about 46th Street or so and down to about 48th Street, I believe, on the west side of France Avenue. It's a really kind of a narrow right-of-way. We only had about 7-8 feet to work with. Again, we had a lot of privacy fences that residents had constructed along the property line or right-of-way line. There was about 3 or 4 properties, if I recall, that we had to acquire temporary easements, and that's one reason why the project was delayed over the years. But we're under construction, and the sidewalk is put in, and a lot of the retaining wall is put in. But with those temporary easements, the reason why we had those temporary easements is because you had the topography drop off from that curb line that dropped off to the residents' homes on Meadow Oak, and so we had to essentially redo some of the retaining walls that they had in place to support the sidewalk. And then also the other thing that was existing prior to this was a metal guardrail that was put in essentially to help deflect cars. And I believe one of the residents actually had a car go through that prior to that metal guardrail. I think that went into that location. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we matched what that metal guardrail was doing with the new fence sets that went in. So we enlisted the services of TKDA, who does our bridge inspections and bridge work typically in the city. And actually the gentleman that designed this particular piece here designed most of the 35W bridge, designed most of the bridges over, or has been the overseer of the bridge design on the 169-494 project. So we have a really well-qualified individual that has done the work on this one here. So what they put together is, this is a cross-section kind of looking northbound. If you were to take a slice of the earth, you'd have the curb that's located right there. You have the sidewalk portion, and then you have the retaining wall here, and these are large block retaining walls that are put in. The upper portion of this here is actually a poured sidewalk for the cap portion of it, and the reason being is that it had to have many tons of rebar that was placed in that sidewalk portion that would help connect the fence that was placed on top of this area here and bolted into the sidewalk. There's actually a 3 by 12 railing that's placed along the roadway side of the fence, and that along with the structure of the fence basically replaced the metal guardrail. And it's designed to deflect, redirect the vehicles, but it's not designed to take a head-on collision at a 90 degrees, but it's designed similar to what you have on the sound walls along Highway 100 as far as to deflect the vehicles from. If it was designed to stop a head-on collision, more than likely that person, depending upon their vehicle, wouldn't make it through that type of a crash. So I think that we've done everything we could in this location of what we've indicated to the residents that we were going to do for that. I believe the fence hasn't been installed yet. I believe the materials are still on their way to arrive in here in Edina, but it should be installed before January or so, somewhere in there.
Right, good. I think that'll be good information for folks out there. The Schmids, I guess, were the folks that contacted us that had this particular concern. Any other comments by council on this issue?
One question.
Member Bennett?
Director Houle, thank you for the information. So am I to understand then that the fence will be actually installed on the street side of the lip that now looks to be an edge?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and then the second question is, if there is, if the materials are not yet arrived, so the fence cannot yet be installed, is there some way to put up some sort of temporary screening or fencing, given whatever the interval is going to be between that installation?
Councilmember, I'll find out what the time of arrival is for that fencing, and if it extends out over a long period of time, we will put something up there to help screen it.
Just drove it 2 days ago, and it says sidewalk closed, and it has all these closed barriers there now. I mean, if you're intending to walk on it, you're walking because in an area where it says sidewalk is closed.
Sure, but there have been people walking, so that was, and just in terms of the length of time, the completion is great, and I have had calls of compliment on it as well, so thank you.
Thank you. All right. I've had a chance to read through rather quickly the material supplied by Mr. Benner. This was an issue that I wasn't able to participate in before due to a late arrival from Portland on that intercity leadership visit. I find the submission by Mr. Benner to be pretty compelling. I think it's new evidence. I think it's worthy of consideration. I think the whole action is worthy of reconsideration. I really feel like our council should be making every reasonable effort to figure out a solution that doesn't result in, if it can be avoided, the removal of 30 trees at the homeowner's expense. I think the report of RLK, which is a recognized expert in the field, as is WSB, raises some very interesting issues with regard to the approach of WSB and some potential alternatives that would involve the removal of 2 fir trees and the placement of what's called a W2-4 sign at a location, basically it looks like at the southeast corner of Mr. Benner's yard to warn of the oncoming intersection with Sally Lane when a person is traveling westbound Valley View. So I don't know what we should be doing here eventually, but I think it does warrant further study by staff and further recommendation. Personally, I wouldn't even mind setting it for a public hearing, but to take the pressure off the Benners and staff until we can look at this issue again, I would like to move at this time to rescind the City of Edina's notice dated October 14, 2011, directing the Benners to remove approximately 30 trees along Valley View Road, and ask that, based on the information supplied by Mr. Benner, including the study by RLK, that this matter be sent back to staff for further consideration and recommendation to the council. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I'm against a public hearing on it because we don't do public hearings on enforcing our ordinances. So you stated that you might be interested in a public hearing. If we start opening up every ordinance enforcement to a public hearing, we might as well start meeting on a nightly basis here because we enforce ordinances all the time. So I'm against opening this up for a public hearing. I also am against rescinding the order because I think we based it on facts. I'm okay with having our attorney make sure that the facts we based it on are accurate. But I don't, and so I would be okay with giving a number of days timeline before they would have to comply with it to make sure that's the case. And anyone else can speak as to how they feel.
I would concur. I believe we did make it based on fact. And we've talked about this ordinance before, and the ordinance itself gives us plenary authority to remove fencing and landscaping from the boulevard. It's right there in the ordinance. It also talks about pine trees and other related firs. That's in the ordinance as well. You don't even need to get to that portion. It's been a problem. It's been revisited over the years many times, and I don't believe we should go back and second guess what staff has brought forward to us on an issue of public safety. And so I don't support rescinding it either.
I don't think there's any question that public safety is the paramount consideration. The question is whether or not WSB utilized the correct rule or interpretation of MnDOT's rule with regard to the 10-second requirement as opposed to a 6+ second requirement. It changes dramatically what needs to happen in terms of the sight line.
To me, though, that's not dispositive to the decision. It has to do with what we want to allow in the boulevards. And when you look at the size of the trees and the obstruction both for pedestrians and for the drivers, and you look at the pattern of complaints and how long they've gone back, I think we have more than enough authority to make the decision even without the WSB report. That's not dispositive for me. And I think going forward, we should be clear that if you have, as I've said before, if you have landscaping in the boulevard over a certain height, that it can be removed at any time, whether the city gave you initial authority or not and said, you know what, plant this at your own risk. Someday the street may be redone, or we may change our mind. But that's the way it is in the right-of-way for the city. And so that's how I would support the basis for the original decision.
Member Bennett?
Yes. I am comfortable, as Member Swenson suggests, and I think that Member Sprague is also stating, having this information that was just put in front of us this evening, looked at by the city's attorney. But I'm not comfortable making any kind of decision based on this without the opportunity for that review and some kind of analysis. Also, I agree with Member Sprague that the code is clear, there's a reason for the code, and either we enforce the code or we don't have the code. But to have code and enforce it selectively or randomly doesn't seem to be fair to residents, staff, city, or in the interest of public safety.
I don't think the code is clear as to whether it supports our position. I think that there's some pretty effective arguments in here as to the code supporting the position of the Benners.
I haven't had a chance to analyze it. We've had a meeting with a lot of...
I'm not talking about the clear view. I'm talking about prohibited encumbrances or obstructions, which is in 1200.02. It says, except as provided in subdivision 2, no person shall obstruct, encroach upon, encumber, or interfere wholly or partially with any street, boulevard, and so on. And then B says fences or landscaping. Is this landscaping? Does it encumber the right-of-way? Yes.
The trees in question do not overhang the traveled portion of the Valley
That's not the portion of the ordinance that I'm talking about. I'm talking about 1200.02 subdivision 1.
Pointed out the wrong ordinance.
That section of the ordinance that they point out is not applicable here. You don't need to get to that portion of the ordinance. If you just read the ordinance, it's the clear language of the ordinance covers the situation. And I'm happy to, I mean, I would, you know the ordinance, Mr. Knudsen. Can you discuss the interpretation that I just mentioned?
The city has the right to remove from the right-of-way anything that interferes with travel or pedestrians or bicycles or anyone using your right-of-way. If you determine it's a safety hazard, then you can require it to be removed.
Point blank.
Well, I appreciate the work that has been done here and provided for us. I would vote to rescind our decision of a couple of weeks ago because I think there's information here that could possibly change how I would vote, and therefore I would like the chance to vote again. Looking at an area that I know intimately, there is the reverse curve, and I know that the question was asked when we discussed this last time about the geometry of that reverse curve, and the answer was given that that the geometry would not change. I think I'd like some more study on that, because if we can change that curve so that the approach to Sally Lane is more direct, the sight line is completely different.
So you're going to move the road to save the trees?
Adjust that sight line, adjust that reverse curve. Adjust the reverse.
What does adjust mean?
Well, instead of having it scoop so far back.
So you're going to move the road to change the curve?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'd like to find out if that's a possibility, because the land, this is not, the Benner property is not the only property that has vegetation that needs to be removed if we deem it needs to be removed. The property to the east has what I think is the most offending evergreen, and it is a shrub at the curb, right at the curb, closer to the curb than...
You mean the property to the east of the Benners?
Yes. It has one shrub that's right at the road, and it's all the way out to the road. Nothing on the Benner property is all the way out to the road.
In a nutshell, I mean, here's what bothers me about it. It doesn't, the situation out there now, there is no violation of the Clearview ordinance. So then what about the sightline issue? RLK says that with the removal of 2 trees and the placement of the sign, there is no sightline issue. Everybody can travel safely, whether you're on Valley View or Sally Lane. And so why use this, in that case, since you're creating a safe environment, and incidentally, there hasn't been an accident there for over 10 years, why not do something that is conservative and still meets the requirements from a safety standpoint? It doesn't involve the decimation of their yard at a cost that might approach $20,000 to remove 30 trees. I mean, it just seems like we can accomplish what we want to accomplish in terms of creating an adequate sight line for safety purposes for travel.
Are you against having our city attorney look at it?
Well, no.
No,
I'm
of course not.
No, but I think that we are going to run up against this 30-day rule. That's why I suggested rescinding it and sending it back to staff for further study and recommendation.
So we're clear, I can look at the legal issues. I'm not the person to judge whether it's safe or not.
Yeah,
Right.
I understand.
agreed,
Yeah.
agreed.
And they've raised a couple of legal issues. I mean, the first one is there's no legal basis for the action demanded in the city's letter. Well, I don't know. I suspect there probably is, but...
But I think in what I stated, I said that we wouldn't cause action to happen until after we'd had a report from the city attorney. So I don't see why you have to rescind it and go through the whole thing until we've had that report, Mayor.
Well, the letter they received gives them a date by which the trees have to come out.
Yeah, and I've asked that we hold up that date until we've heard from our city attorney.
All right. Maybe
So I don't think you hit
okay.
the
I
date.
didn't quite understand what you
So I
meant
don't
there.
think the date on the letter is the issue.
So what if we, see, when our next meeting is the, what is it, the 15th?
15th.
So his 30-day window would be up to the 14th, or actually the 13th. There's 31 days in October.
I mean, right now,
we would suspend action on this matter until such time as the city attorney reports back to us, which would be the next city council meeting?
that'd be fine.
I won't be present for that meeting, but you're welcome to vote on it.
You don't want to vote because you'll end up with a tie vote. So can we set it for the meeting that Josh is back?
We can. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these trees have been there for 20 years. It's not going to make any difference if we wait 2 weeks or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Manager Neal, would that work with our schedule?
All right. So let me withdraw my motion. Would you withdraw your second? I'll make a new motion.
Okay, agreed.
I'd move that this matter, that the October 14, 2011 30-day notice letter be suspended until we have an opportunity to hear from our city attorney at our meeting set for December 6th, 2011. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Carried.
The petition that we got from Valley Estates, Manager Neal, what is its next, what happens with it next? I'm sure the people that submit it would like to know where it goes.
Well, at this point, we received, I think, one, was it at the last meeting, Deb? Same thing. This is the formal action of receiving that petition. And then if there's any action to be had, it's during the project hearing when they come forward.
Okey-doke. Just so they know kind of, yes, what to
Yeah.
expect.
Sure.
This is their expression, their upfront expression to let you know they're not interested.
All right, I just report out on what's been going on for me, city-related and region-related. On the 19th of October, attended a TAB meeting. One of the interesting issues there is there was some CMAQ money floating around on a project that didn't go forward, and the MPCA wanted to use $500,000 of that money to build out some electric vehicle plug-in stations around the metro. That created a real interesting discussion that went nowhere, and the vote on it's been delayed until November, as people discuss the pros and cons of that issue. We had a Southwest LRT Community Works meeting on the 20th. On the 24th, I met with a couple of members of our Art Center Board, Hafed Buseda and Tom Reuchle, and we talked about looking at, as the suggestion was that as we look at the Art Center and have this consultant give us advice on the Art Center, that we also think about arts and culture in Edina on a broader basis, and that be part of the consideration. So I just tell the council about that now to give that a little bit of thought, that notion. And then that afternoon, Manager Neal did a great job of making a presentation over at a meeting in St. Paul where that Senator Al Franken had called, basically about creating jobs through green strategies, I'll call it. And we reported out on the PACE program activities that we were engaged in, and Manager Neal did a great job of telling probably 200 people in that room what the progress was on our PACE participation. And then on the 25th, attended the Governor's Jobs Summit, and I was on one of the panels over there. That was interesting. And then also I was part of a senior housing panel that day over at Golden Valley Country Club. And then we had a Dewtown meeting that afternoon, as I mentioned before, with Rick Dressen, and came up with some great ideas on coordinating those activities with the school district. And then today, this morning, was MLC's first legislative program subcommittee meeting, and I participated in that. And Manager Neal, I got some materials for you that I'll pass on from that meeting. And that's it for me. Anything else anyone else wants to raise? Manager Neal, you've got a couple of things that you want to cover with us.
I do. The first one is just to see if there's been some additional thought given to your email protocol and whether you'd like to keep the current system of receiving email that's sent to you at the Edina Mail address, which means that it comes to all of you all at the same time, all email, all the same time, and it is continually updated and filed appropriately by Ms. Mangan's office. Or do you wish to separate and have your own individual city email addresses on the homepage that people can contact you directly? We talked a little bit about the pros and cons of that at the last meeting. It's not an issue that needs to be changed. The default condition is the Edina Mail situation that we've used for a number of years, but this is a chance for you to change it if you wish.
Manager Neal, is there a third option to just have our own individual emails on there?
To have your personal email address, we can do that as well.
I mean, as I said before, that's what I've seen other councils do.
I would be comfortable with a hybrid, both of, if a resident intends to communicate with the council as a group, or every council member, I think the use of Edina Mail is very convenient for them. And the filing system at City Hall is convenient for residents and council members. At the same time, I think it also would be beneficial to have members' choice but have an individual email address provided. My choice would be to continue to provide my personal email address, as I've been doing.
I live with Gmail, and I went into my spam box after you asked what we thought about this, and half of the Edina extras end up going into spam. If there's some word in in whatever it is that you're putting out there that sounds the least bit like they might be asking me if I want to buy drugs or something like, it's very interesting. Okay, is that it? Because that made me wonder, would I then, I don't want to go to another email site and look up email. Then I have 3 emails I have to look at every day, and that's way too cumbersome.
Can't you add to the safe senders list if it goes into spam in Gmail? I mean, I think
Edina Extra is on my safe senders list, and they still end up occasionally in spam depending on what.
So you got to check your spam folder.
Yeah.
Or or you have to check another email.
But
Either
how
way,
will I know
either
if I
check-
look at it that it's from a resident versus from somebody that I don't want to open up?
Well, you can see the email.
Having crashed 2 computers
Yeah.
from viruses recently, I really don't want to take that risk. The last one caused me to buy another $1,000 computer because we couldn't, what we put on to get rid of the virus was so cumbersome, it actually didn't function.
But a normal email from a normal address wouldn't go into the spam folder necessarily. Hers goes in there from City Extra because of the method of distribution. So you might not have the issue you're thinking
Okay.
of when it's sent individually.
I just don't want to miss somebody's email, but I don't want to have to open up anything that, I don't want to have to go to spam and then start randomly opening up things that might be from a constituent.
Don't open up the Viagra emails, I'll tell you right now.
What's the timing on Lynette sending emails that she gets to us?
Yeah.
All right.
Is that what you mean?
Right. And so I'm comfortable, personally, I'm comfortable with that system.
Okay.
You know, I'm dealing with 100 to 200 a day anyway, and getting them from her.
Okay.
You know, I just kind of scroll through everything, and I don't set hers aside. I just read them in due course. But
So I think what I'm hearing is if you wish to have, provide residents an additional email option to contact you individually, why don't you provide that address directly to Jennifer, and we'll make that modification.
I'm comfortable with the way it is. What ends up happening is if I correspond back, as I do to many of the emails that come through, then they come back to me.
Same.
And that's fine. But what we may want to do on the page where it says email a council member or whatever it says, to email all council members, click here.
Yep.
If you want to email individuals, here's how you can reach each individual.
Except that the mayor wants to keep the Edina mail under his name as well, so it'll be confusing. Because they'll see Edina mail for everyone and then Edina mail for an individual.
We'll figure out a way to make that clear, but I
see.
I understand what you're thinking about.
Okay, well, nonetheless, I'll go on record saying I'm comfortable the way it is. It's fine.
as I'm thinking about it, go ahead, Mary, finish that thought.
I have no problem.
As I think about it a little bit more, when I see Lynette's name there, it tends to have some priority for me, as opposed to seeing an email from somebody I don't know.
Yeah, true.
So I would,
Especially right before a council
I like them
meeting.
coming through the city, because that tells me,
Yeah.
take a look at this as soon as you can.
If we have to be here by 5, usually by 4:30, I've made the last check to see if her name comes up, to see if there was anything that got emailed in before the council meeting.
I guess I would just add for a constituent, it's nice to be able to email your representative directly, and that would also factor into my decision, not just the convenience of getting an email. I mean, if I look on, there's other, you can go look around other cities, but most cities have council individual emails listed, just like a phone number for any of us. You know, so that would be the convention I would.
He's the
I would go.
youngest one of us, and he's the most technology astute
understand.
of us. Can you hear
Yeah,
the
I know.
difference between our responses and his? Yeah, that would be it right there.
Got it.
We're not there.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Okay, proposed France Avenue pedestrian.
So, again, if I understand, there will be that general email address if someone wishes to email all council members. That in addition, people who wish to email a particular council member, for 3 will be directed still to Edina Mail, and for 2 will be directed to individual email addresses.
Otherwise, couldn't you give the other members a separate, no, you don't want that either? Okay, I'll butt out.
Thank you.
Okay, the other item on
Take care of your technology.
under my
I'll take
report
care of
is something I previewed just a bit at our last meeting, and that is the proposed France Avenue pedestrian bridge. Staff have been, even prior to my arrival, but certainly since that time, have been working on advancing a potential project through a number of kind of internal reviews, and now almost getting ready to seek some outside consulting assistance to design a bridge that would bridge France Avenue in the general area of 72nd Street and Park Lawn. Is that correct? 72nd Street. And there has been some discussion about the advisability of this project at the ETC. In fact, the ETC has gone on record as not supporting the project. When staff considers what its mission is and what its role is, our role is, of course, is to further the direction of the City Council, and that includes not only the council that we're sitting with today, but of past councils. Until that past direction is changed, that's what we ought to do, I think. And I think you would want the same in the future when we have a new council here as well. So we have a direction that the council gave to staff in 2007, and that direction was to seek additional funding, and provide, to seek funding and pursue grant applications for the funding of a bridge, of a pedestrian bridge over France Avenue. We're almost 5 years, 4 years for sure from that decision, and it's quite possible that the environment has changed and wishes have changed, and so now we've come to the council to say, is this a project that you reaffirm a previous council support for, or is it a project that you wish to take a different tack on? And we need to know that because we need to do a couple of things for this project if you wish us to consider it further. We need to seek Metropolitan Council waiver or some additional time to pursue it because there's a grant involved. And if we don't seek and receive that permission or that waiver, we won't be able to perform on the grant application, and we won't be able to use grant funds to do it. But also in general, I think it's a big enough project. It's certainly going to be an expensive enough project that if it doesn't have the general support of the council, we really need to direct our own internal resources, both the human resources and the financial resources, onto something else, because this will be a significant financial commitment and time and energy commitment from city staff, and if there isn't sufficient council support for that, you should tell us that, and we will move on. There's many other worthy projects that we could use that time and talent to be dedicated to. So that would be my intro to you. We're really looking for sort of a going forward direction from the council tonight, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Member Swenson.
I just want to say something because I think I sit in a different position than everyone else on this, so I just want to offer something ahead of time. I don't see this as an either-or. As Josh said the other day, I'm like a toddler, I want everything. That might be true, but I see this as an opportunity for our community that has it has a timeline because the grant has a timeline, but it also has a timeline because Byerly's and Macy's Home Store are kind of looking at doing something different in their property. So I think it's a great concept to get pedestrian islands and better crossing and things like that. I'd like to have both, and I'd like to have both because I want us to think about our connectivity as a city. And Mary talks about this all the time, being connected to your neighborhood school or being connected to your neighborhood park. For me, this is taking that south of 70th area and connecting them in two ways over to Centennial Lakes. And I think that's really important. And I know that if people see a bridge as being too long or it has a lot of curlicues and it looks like an effort to cross, they'll try to cross across the street. But if you're slow or you're elderly or if you have little kids or if you have a stroller, I want both options. And maybe it's wrong to want both, but I think we have some funds in our city. I think we've been really good at some long-range planning. We kept the promenade space. We've built a beautiful walkable area over there. It's just how do you get there? And where I think the ideas of redoing France and at-grade crossings is fabulous, I also want the bridge. So that's all. I don't even need to talk about it anymore.
Okay. Member Sprague.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Neal referenced that maybe things have changed since this first came forward. Certainly they have for us. We passed a complete streets, what did we do? We did a motion to have living streets policy developed by the ETC after kind of like a postscript to complete streets, one step further to include other watershed improvements and so on. Hennepin County adopted a complete streets policy, and then we also determined the alignment for the Three Rivers Trail. So given the design philosophy change, not just with the city but with the county and with the state as well, I don't think that a pedestrian bridge is the right approach. And the reason why it can't be either or is because there's money involved that could go towards a more comprehensive redux of the pedestrian, of the street infrastructure in and around Southdale. For instance, the bridge estimate is, it was noted in Transportation Commission meetings of $3 to $5 million. Tonight, it's estimated at 2.6. The Fed portion is $1 million, so that's 1.6 million. We had a meeting with Patrick Kanoy and Karen Nicolai from Hennepin County Community Works, and we were talking about what the highest, most lavish pedestrian crossing, at-grade crossing would cost. And Director Houle and I thought maybe $200,000 would be the highest end. I mean, that would be with re-signalizing and curb bump outs and median and so on. So that's $200,000 per. How many does 1.6 buy you then? And so therefore, we could do an entire corridor instead of a crossing with that same amount of funds. In addition, at that meeting, they said, we have money available, and we have our own plan for France. It's called the France Avenue Corridor Study, which does not endorse a bridge, but looks at grade pedestrian enhancements. And if you can develop a coalition of different jurisdictions, maybe Richfield, Edina, Hennepin County, invite Hennepin County Works, and invite private businesses from Southdale and so on, and get this group together, work off the Hennepin County France Avenue Corridor Study Plan, and try to develop more of an implementation plan for the entire Southdale area, not just France, but Xerxes. Let's call that our eastern and western gateway, as well as now we've talked about the northern gateway over by 62 and the Ped Bridge. We could cobble together quite a lot of bit of money and have comprehensive change in this area. Another interesting fact that they raised was that they don't consider pedestrian bridges to be connected with economic development, but they do consider at-grade enhancements and corridor enhancements to be directly connected to economic development. This is when you build this corridor out with many different enhanced intersections and trails and the landscaping and so on, businesses want to locate closer to those. See the promenade, for instance. That's a perfect example. And so we have an opportunity, leveraging not just the federal money, but county money, city TIF money, and perhaps some Richfield money for that side of the corridor, and maybe even private enterprises near the France Avenue Bridge to do something very comprehensive and very impactful, and not just for transportation infrastructure, but for economic development. The bridge grants, a scope change can be pursued. And I got some information from a Met Council employee who seems to think they would look quite favorably on a scope change if we could show that one or more of our proposed intersection improvements from this France Avenue corridor plan could meet or even exceed the goal of the pedestrian bridge and at a possibly lower cost. So greater benefit, greater or equal benefit, and a lower cost. And so and the other thing they would want to know is that Hennepin County would be on board. Well, obviously, if we're leveraging the ideas in their study, they'd be on board. So I think we have a very good opportunity for a scope change on this, and we can use the federal money in a way that will make more comprehensive change, and that's more reflective of where our design philosophy has come since the pedestrian bridge has first come forward. And then the final note is just on the usefulness of the pedestrian bridge, and we talked about this in the meeting as well. Pedestrians don't like to be funneled. They like to go across the shortest possible intersection. And people from my neighborhood, the Cornelia neighborhood, are not going to be crossing at one single point, nor will they want to. They want to be at 69th if they're over on Southdale Road. They want to be on 70th if they're on 70th. They want to be at Gallagher, you know, and so on down the road as you go down France. They're not going to be, they will not practice, and research shows that they will not be funneled into one single overpass. And the metrics from a Texas study that I want to reference, and then I'll call quits, is it says 70% of pedestrians will use an overpass if the crossing time is roughly equal to crossing at grade. But if crossing time is just 50% more than that at-grade crossing, the number of pedestrians who will use the overpass drops to less than 5%. So you tell me, we know how far across France is. Will a elderly person or someone pushing a stroller going across a bridge be more than 50% than going straight across an enhanced pedestrian crossing? I'm willing to venture the answer would be yes, and therefore no one's going to use the bridge, and we just lost, we just built something that's not being used and doesn't have any possible widespread benefit for the city. So I would vote tonight to direct staff to pursue a scope change for the grant for enhanced at-grade crossings as reflected in the Hennepin County study, which is called the France Avenue Corridor Study.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, let's discuss that.
My input is that I was one of the people who voted for this in March 2007. We did not have a lot of discussion about it. There were at the time 2 bridges contemplated, one north, one south. There was discussion about people moving across France at different points, and I have hunted through the entire Greater Southdale study and not found reference to this bridge. What I do recall during the time of the Greater Southdale study was what was discussed in the nature of a bridge was actually a bridge, motor and pedestrian, at West 70th Street with France itself trenched like 35 is in Duluth. And businesses were opposed to that. It would have completely changed the nature of the street. But that was the bridge that was under discussion during the Greater Southdale study. So what I recall from 2007 is a preliminary discussion that this is something we're contemplating, don't have a lot of information, and we agreed that funding could be sought, could be pursued, which was then obtained, and then there was no further discussion. We really have not discussed this since 2007 until this year. And as Member Sprague points out, there have been a lot of things that have changed. The promenade was not built back in 2007. It was beginning. The process of building it was beginning. We did not know what was going to be connected by those pathways. We did not know how people were going to move around the area. There has now been a pedestrian study in the area, and it shows that people are crossing at all kinds of points, including some dangerous points on York and some of the middle streets. So the idea that there are multiple crossings and that we need to, as a city, be doing what we can to make those crossings safer, I think is a big one. Another very big event since 2007 is the approval of the trail. And during that entire discussion, we did not talk about bridge being at 72nd and crossing of the trail being at this area. It was not brought up. There was no discussion of changing the alignment. And we do know that one thing that a bridge, a non-motorized bridge serves is recreational bike trail traffic. That's not going to exist here. And in fact, looking at the aerial view that's been provided to us, the disconnect is significant enough that I don't know what kind of land acquisition or movement would need to take to get bicyclists north enough to get onto a bridge to then, again, come south. Again, it just wasn't planned for, it wasn't contemplated, it wasn't discussed. The alignment is in place. It was passed by this council. It's passed every other body it needs to go past. I think it's a good alignment, and it connects directly to the greater regional trail going through the facility under York. And it's done. It's a good alignment. This was not envisioned or planned for. I also agree that there's a lot of money at stake, whether the source is federal, state, county, local. It's still taxpayer money. We want to spend it in the most responsible and highest impact way possible. I know that we've all seen people crossing at multiple points on France Avenue, at least 5 different points. There is also York to consider. I believe that it's within the TIF geographic area. Member Swenson is correct. We have been good stewards of money, and there is money here to create a lot of good for residents and workers and pedestrians in the area. There is also, staff has brought forward tonight for the first time, contemplation of having money to spend at that France and Trunk Highway 62 crosstown interchange. So that's another item that wasn't in front of us in 2007, now is, and it would be good to have some serious money to put into that as a partner with other funding entities. So those are the reasons that I second this motion. I think it would be good to get clarity and go forward and use the money in the most respectful, highest impact way, which I think is at-grade pedestrian crossings in as many locations as possible.
Member Brindle.
You know, looking at things a few years ago, sitting at a table at Braemar, at the clubhouse, looking at the Southdale area when we first started talking about redevelopment and what's the future of the Southdale area. I would imagine that a pedestrian bridge across France Avenue or somehow separating pedestrian traffic from car traffic on France Avenue was discussed at nearly, I know it was discussed at my table, and I'm sure it was discussed at many of the tables there. And there were, I'm sure, a variety of ways to do that, whether the car traffic is at one level and like with the promenade, the pedestrian traffic is at another level, so you completely separate them. But that brings all pedestrians to one area and one safe way to cross. And it's, I shouldn't say one, it's all the way along France Avenue. So you've got 2 levels of passage, one for vehicles, one for passengers, and you're crossing at any street you want to cross at. And it's for whatever pedestrian at one level, cars at the other. That is not, I mean, whether that can be a reality or not, that isn't our discussion tonight. That's been my dream, is to have that kind of separation. The bridge, I'm really cautious when thinking about a pedestrian bridge. Across Highway 100, it's a no-brainer. There is no other way for a pedestrian to cross Highway 100. Across Crosstown by Roslyn Park, that again is a no-brainer. There is no other way for a pedestrian to cross Crosstown, to get from the north side of Crosstown at Valley View and Wooddale over to Roslyn Park. So those 2 pedestrian bridges, you're not going to get any argument on those. There are lots of ways to cross France Avenue. We just need to make them safer. I do know that there's a petition by residents who in their hearts believe, and believed when they signed the petition a number of years ago, that the pedestrian bridge is the safest way for them to get across France Avenue. If I am at 70th Street, or if I am at 66th, and I want to cross France Avenue, I am not going to go to 72nd, go up the switchback, get to the bridge, and go down the switchback to cross France Avenue. I'm going to cross France Avenue at grade at a light. I can't believe I'm that different than a lot of other people. They have strollers, they have disabilities, they have many children hanging on them. We just need to make that at-grade crossing safer for everybody. I think if I look at the bridge for what are the aspects of the bridge that would make it really a benefit, I have trouble with. What are the aspects of the bridge that really make it not a workable solution? One of them is the touch point, particularly on the east side of France. If you're going to use the bridge, either you're going to walk there or you're going to drive to it and park there. I don't see how we'd get a parking structure there. I don't know that there is land enough there to put a parking structure there. And certainly where it is surrounded by private property. So I don't see that, that it's going to be easy to make a structure so it's easy for people to get to the bridge, park there, cross, do their business, and come back. So as far as I'm concerned, I think our responsibility is to look at creatively, find ways to get people across France Avenue at grade safely. With all I have written here, and we've all talked, and we know about the trail that's going across at Gallagher at grade, not on a bridge. I'm not even aware that Three Rivers is interested in using the bridge in the location where it would be, or a bridge. I think they want to just hook right onto the promenade as quickly as possible at grade. The thing that appeals to me is when I have been in other cities that are high pedestrian areas, there are signal times where all directions are red. Pedestrians are moving diagonally any way they want during that period of time. So if that's lunchtime, if that's the high pedestrian periods of time, then maybe some of those, some of the signal changes could be modified to accommodate, pedestrians only and get them across and give them that access to get from one side to the other, and no right turn on red. Everybody's stopped while pedestrians make their way. And the first time I encountered it, I thought it was inspired. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. But I really think this would be a great location for it on France as well as on York. But as far as I'm concerned, I think the bridge, if we put it up, it wouldn't be used. I'm just not convinced it would be used. I respect that at the time that the residents signed the petition, they asked for what they felt was right. But with what we know now, and I respect Community Works, I do know Patrick Canoy and respect him, and I think it's not the right thing for that location.
Thank you. I think in 2007, when I also voted for seeking this money, I kind of romanticized the idea. Yeah, and I credit Director Houle, I think, for coming to us and saying, hey, should we try to get some money for a pedestrian bridge across France Avenue, because we've been looking at the problems of non-motorized movements and people trying to get across France Avenue, and it just seemed like a bridge too far in a way. So without thinking too much about the level of match required, we sort of leapt forward, and our erstwhile director did a whole bunch of work with other folks on our staff to make this submission to the tab, and we ended up with a grant. Now, from sitting on the tab, I can tell you that this motion is interesting, but a request for a scope change requires rescoring on the original standards. So we may or may not be approved on a rescoping request. Yeah, so that's right.
That money's gone.
I think you have to, the question the council needs to kind of ask itself, or answer, I guess, is are you prepared to lose the federal funding due to a denial of a scope change request? That's kind of the key question. So projects are scored based upon certain pre-established criteria created by the technical advisory people advising the tab. And you know, I think we got a shot, because I think Josh is right from a general standpoint. You hear folks talk about from the technical side over there that if you can show that there's a greater or equal benefit at a lower cost with the rescoped project as opposed to the original project, you may have a chance. But there's a lot of subtlety in that scoring that may or may not keep us in that same position we were in before, or whether other projects might come back past us.
That's why we have you.
So
if we don't get the scope change, Mayor Hovland does.
So, all right. I'm thinking about that, Mr. Co-Chair of the Programming Committee. The extension of the sunset date is, you know, we should make up our mind on this. I feel us moving towards a decision tonight, because extending the sunset date should only be requested if there are circumstances basically beyond our control that prevent us from moving forward on the project. Well, it'd be disingenuous for us to ask for a extension on the sunset date of a year. That's all we could get, because really we're just kind of muddled and indecision here, and we can go forward with the project. At least we were before tonight. I don't think there's any indecision now. People are either for it or against it. So. You know, I just, you know, as the years have gone by since 2007, and you see now what the match would be that would be required to take advantage of a significant amount of money, I just can't see it either. I think we need to be working at grade. I think we need to be trying to figure out what we can do there with multiple jurisdictions. I think we have to be working with the county. We have to be working with Three Rivers. We have to be working with 9 Mile. You know, Richfield, anybody that we can work with to make sure that we do something that's coordinated and connected and has value. I think all of you have made great points about, you know, Josh, economic development opportunities that come about from having the right kind of connectivity, and all of the rest of you too for the reasons that you stated. So I guess I'm prepared to take my chances with a scope change request for the project that would involve, actually, I think with $1 million at stake, we should ask for multiple at-grade crossing improvements.
We have, you know, we could leverage some of the information in this France Avenue corridor study that's out there. And I could also argue, I don't know how this comes up in the scope change, that this was the catalyst for our redirection in many ways. And I might argue that and talk about, you know, I mean, we've had some discussions with Hennepin County staff about this already.
If we do something with that's consistent with Hennepin County's corridor study, then we'll probably have at least one vote there from the county. You know,
and you know, Patrick Kanoy made some good points about. You know, he felt like after this scope change is taken care of, we should put this broad-based committee together, and that and develop from this and from our other ideas about the entire Southdale, greater Southdale area, our vision and an action plan for implementation, perhaps prioritizing what we're going to do, and that would have more weight if he were to bring that to the Hennepin County Board as well. So that we could show, you know what, we're not acting unilaterally, we're acting in concert with many different jurisdictions. We've accessed all kinds of different pots of money. He also said that once you start to create that broad-based coalition, people all of a sudden start coming up with these pots of money out of nowhere. So, I mean, I think, like, for instance, I think about another point brought up was, think about connectivity to the Hennepin County Library. Boy, would they love to see people accessing that from the west side of France as well as from the east side, from the Richfield side. And could we have Richfield in partnership doing something with maybe some of their development money on York, since it will benefit their residents as well. But, you know, and then Director Hool and Manager Neal and during this meeting, we're talking about the bridge, and, you know, maybe it's a public-private partnership, you know, like the Bren Avenue Bridge on 169. Maybe private entities need to be involved in the funding as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and momentum in this direction that could follow.
I think those are good points. If we try to rescope this, I think.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All I was going to say is that if, for us to pursue a scope change, we will need some council action tonight or as soon as possible to pursue that.
We've got a motion and second in front of us requesting a scope change.
Okay.
To go to at-grade crossing.
Okay. I think that's probably sufficient, Director Hool.
We should probably have also the extension of the sunset date, even with the scope change, because that sunset date, I believe, still would apply towards a scope change if we were successful on the scope change.
And there was some indication that they might be friendly to a reschedule, right, a delay.
Yeah.
I think you can look at your application originally and get some insight into how the thing was scored. And then I think you could also talk to Kevin Roggenbuck at the council, and he won't tell you exactly what to do, but he'll give you some ideas on how it was scored out in the first place, what the different categories were, and what the weighting was. And then maybe we can build our rescoping application accordingly. And I think we ought to try to get some partners, as you indicated.
So
I think that'll help.
Restate the motion as a motion to approve a scope change. A motion to approve a scope change for the from the pedestrian bridge to at-grade, multiple at-grade crossings, and also to pursue an extension of the sunset date.
So, is there a second? I'll second it again.
Yes, I second it, and I'll
You
second
did.
it. And I'll second it again. For clarification, I think in light of the question that's been put before us, we are no longer pursuing funding for a pedestrian bridge, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
On France Avenue.
On France, right, because there are places that we really do need them. Yes, the second stands, or is restated.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried.
Can I be sad that the bridge is going away at least for 1 year? Okay, thank you.
Here, you can cry on my shoulder over here.
All right, well, that...
I did forget to mention one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
The Edina Art Center starts their gifts program on, Mary, I think it's Saturday?
I believe it's Saturday.
Yeah. And I meant to bring the card and hand it to Jennifer so she could, because it's a very nice picture on their postcard honoring it. And if I think about it, I'll drop it off tomorrow if we can maybe send an extra. You sent an extra out already about it, but the picture on the card is really cute. And it was done by one of our residents, so.
Yeah, there was a city extra on it. Gifts, gifts, gifts.
That did not go to my spam. That went to my resident.
I will miss you all dearly on my vacation, just so you know.
Have a great time.
Oh, yeah.
We'll call you. Keep your cell phone on.
Don't make any important decisions without me now.
Okay. You'll notice I set that one decision off for 2 weeks.
Member Swenson made me think of one other thing that I thought was important that you guys would want to know about, and that, remember when we set that Days of Remembrance event here?
Yeah.
We sent a letter out to Fred Barron, who was a Holocaust survivor, and I got a letter back from him dated October 26th, and I just want to read a part of it. It says, I want to thank you, the Council, for your proclamation setting Days of Remembrance for an event which happened so long ago and so far away, but which still casts a shadow on our daily lives. And that's kind of the essence of it. I mean, there were some other things in here that were important too, but it was really a nice letter from Mr. Barron thanking us for what we had done there on the Holocaust. So that's it for me, and anything for anyone else? All right, we stand adjourned.